Imagine waking up with a vivid memory of a childhood event, maybe getting lost at a carnival or petting a giant red dog. You can picture the sounds, the people, even the smell of popcorn in the air. But what if that memory is completely false, not distorted, fictional? Your brain, tricked by suggestion, stress, or even dreams, has written it into your mental timeline as truth. This isn't science fiction. It's a documented, repeatable, and haunting phenomenon: false memory implantation. In one of the most chilling studies, researchers asked people to recall being lost in a shopping mall as a child. It never happened, but most participants believed it, and worse, they added elaborate details. They remembered who helped them, what they wore, even how scared they felt. Their minds built a story that never existed, but felt utterly real. False memories don't feel false. That's the trap. Courts have sentenced innocent people based on confident eyewitnesses whose memories were wrong. Therapists have unintentionally implanted false memories of abuse. Families have been torn apart by things that never occurred. Even your most cherished, nostalgic moment could be fiction written by your brain to fill in blanks. Your memory is not a video recorder. It's a dynamic editor, constantly rewriting scenes. It merges imagination, emotion, and fragments from movies, dreams, and overheard stories, sewing them into your identity. And once that fiction takes root, it becomes indistinguishable from reality. What if your first kiss, your most painful goodbye, or your earliest fear was never real, but your brain insists it was? Every photograph, every scent, every familiar street could be a trigger, not of truth, but of fabrication. You don't just remember, your brain re-experiences, and once the emotion floods in, it seals the lie as fact. So next time you swear something happened, pause. Is it a memory or a masterpiece of the mind? What if part of your vision was a beautifully convincing lie, constructed not by an external illusionist, but by your own brain? Right now, as you're watching this, there's a physical hole in your vision. It's where your optic nerve exits the retina, an unavoidable blind spot with no light-sensitive cells, no rods, no cones, no input. And yet, you see nothing missing, no gaps, no void. Why? Because your brain fakes it. Your mind stitches the scenery together using surrounding information. If there's color, it clones it. If there's texture, it duplicates. It fabricates whatever fits best, instantly, seamlessly, without asking. You see a reality that doesn't exist, and you're convinced it's the truth. Try this. Close your left eye. Focus your right eye on a fixed letter or cross. Now, slowly move your thumb across your vision. At a certain point, it will disappear completely. Not hidden, gone, swallowed by the blind spot. But the background doesn't blink. Your brain quietly paints over the truth with a plausible fiction. This isn't a malfunction. It's evolution's shortcut. A gap in vision meant danger, so nature chose illusion. But here's the disturbing part. If your brain edits your visual world so effortlessly, what else is it rewriting? How many blind spots exist in your memories, your emotions, your identity? You don't notice what's missing because you were never shown the absence. Your perception of reality isn't raw footage. It's a highlight reel with smooth transitions, missing frames, and clever edits. What you see is not what is. It's what your brain believes you need to see. You're not just perceiving reality, you're performing it. And most terrifying of all, you never asked for the script. Imagine lying awake, staring at the ceiling, trapped in a single looping thought. It's the same fear, the same regret, the same what if, playing on repeat like a broken record. You tell yourself you're solving something, that thinking it through one more time will finally bring peace. But what if that's a lie? What if every repetition is carving a deeper trap in your mind? This is the looping thought trap, what psychologists call rumination. It feels like control. It feels like problem solving. But what you're really doing is reinforcing pain. Neuroscience calls it long-term potentiation. Each time the same neural circuit fires, it grows stronger, faster, more automatic. You're not moving forward, you're getting stuck. Your brain builds a superhighway for fear, and your body joins the ride. Stress hormones spike, sleep becomes impossible. Studies link chronic rumination to anxiety, depression, inflammation, and even heart disease. It's not harmless. It's damage dressed as logic. To escape, you have to interrupt. Speak the thought aloud. Write it down. Move your body. Engage your senses. Your brain can't spiral and focus at the same time. Break the loop. Create friction. New pathways. Because without interruption, the groove becomes a canyon, and the thought becomes your prison. So, next time your mind circles back, ask yourself, is this helping me heal, or am I rehearsing my suffering again? Because not all thinking is wise. Some is just a well-worn lie. Let it go. Not because it's trivial, but because clinging to it is costing you your sanity, your sleep, your peace. Some thoughts don't deserve repetition. They deserve release. Your mind is powerful, but it needs your permission to let go. Choose freedom over repetition. What if the person staring back from the mirror wasn't entirely you? Imagine locking eyes with your own reflection for 10 long minutes in dim light. At first, it's just your face. But then it starts to change. Features distort. Eyes sink. A grin flickers where none was. You feel watched by something wearing your skin. This isn't horror fiction. It's a scientifically observed effect known as the strange face illusion. Psychologist Giovanni Caputo conducted mirror-gazing experiments where participants stared at their reflections for prolonged periods. The results were stunning. 90% saw grotesque distortions, melting features, animalistic faces, even demonic figures. Many reported a powerful sense of dissociation, as if their reflection no longer represented their true self. Some even believed a separate entity had taken their place. Why does this happen? Our brain is designed to process faces with astonishing sensitivity, but also with vulnerability. In low light, our neural systems responsible for facial recognition begin to misfire. With static gaze, these neurons fatigue, and the brain starts auto-correcting the image. Visual information fades, and the brain fills in gaps, often with surreal or disturbing imagery. What's terrifying is how easily this can happen to anyone. You don't need hallucinations or illness, just your own reflection and a few minutes of silence. The mirror doesn't lie, but your brain does. So ask yourself, when you look in the mirror, how do you know it's still you? Imagine waking up with a tight knot in your stomach. You feel anxious, uneasy, but you don't know why. So your brain gets to work. Maybe you forgot something. Maybe that email from your boss meant more. Or maybe something bad is about to happen. None of this is real, yet your brain invents a cause to match the emotion. This is cause-effect reversal, and it happens more than you think. Your brain doesn't always wait for a reason to feel something. Instead, it often feels first, then invents the reason after. It's called confabulation, and it's scientifically proven. In classic split brain studies, researchers found patients making up stories to explain actions their conscious minds didn't initiate. One hand presses a button, the other, confused, explains, "I just wanted to test it." But that's a lie, constructed after the action. This backwards logic is a defense mechanism. Your brain craves order, meaning, purpose. It hates randomness. So when your body reacts, heart racing, skin sweating, it demands a reason. And it finds one, even if it's fiction. This is why people feel watched before noticing a camera, or assume someone's angry just because they feel tense. The emotion creates the story, not the other way around. Now, imagine how dangerous this can be. You distrust someone not because of facts, but because your gut told you so. Then, you invent reasons. You feel guilt and start rewriting events to match. You justify rage with faulty logic. You invent betrayals. The brain lies in reverse, sewing cause from effect, like stitching shadows to light. It's not just an illusion. It's a silent war in your mind, where the effect becomes the cause. What if every time you remembered something, you weren't reliving the event, but the emotion you felt the last time you recalled it? Imagine thinking back to your childhood home, a breakup, or the happiest day of your life. The pictures in your mind feel real, but they've changed. Not because the past changed, but because your feelings did. This is emotional memory rewrite, and it means your memories are feelings wearing masks. When we recall an experience, the brain doesn't pull a frozen file. It reconstructs the memory using emotional cues from our last recall. If you were angry the last time you remembered a childhood argument, the anger gets layered in again. If you've grown more nostalgic, that memory softens, colors warm. Memory isn't playback, it's repainting. In one study, participants recalled a neutral event. Later, researchers manipulated their mood: sad, happy, anxious, When asked to remember the same event again, their recollection changed based on their current feelings. Even the emotional tone of neutral memories twisted with mood. This is why trauma can grow heavier over time, and joy can fade. Each time you revisit a moment, your current emotions bleed into it. Eventually, you're not remembering what happened. You're remembering the version your brain painted last. And yet, you trust it. You say, "I know what I saw," or "I'll never forget." But what you're really saying is, "I remember how I felt the last time I thought about this." Your memories aren't photographs. They're stories your feelings keep rewriting. What if love felt stronger, or betrayal sharper, not because of the event, but because of how your feelings evolved over time? Every retelling adds another brushstroke. Your emotions become editors, and over years, the truth becomes a feeling more than a fact. So next time you swear your memory is crystal clear, ask yourself, whose version are you reliving? The original or the last emotional echo? Imagine looking up at the clouds and seeing a face staring back, or spotting a figure in the shadows that wasn't really there. What if your brain was hardwired to find meaning in randomness, even when none exists? This isn't superstition, it's biology. It's called pareidolia, and it's one of the strangest survival traits we carry. Your brain is a pattern-detecting machine. Faces, symbols, voices. It's constantly scanning chaos for something familiar. Why? Because recognizing danger, allies, or food from the faintest cue once meant life or death. It was better to see a tiger that wasn't there than to miss the one that was. False positives became evolution's default setting. In the ancient world, seeing a human face in the bushes could trigger adrenaline, preparing the body to fight or flee. Those who hesitated vanished. So the brain became an artist of assumption, sketching faces in clouds, cliffs, or flickering flames. But now, in a world without predators lurking in the trees, this glitch lingers. You see ghosts in window reflections, hear whispers in static, and recognize expressions in lifeless dolls or twisted tree bark. Religious icons appear in burnt toast or water stains. Your mind, desperate for meaning, crafts it from coincidence. This doesn't make you foolish. It makes you deeply, vulnerably human. But it also means your world is shaped by invisible expectations. Haunted, not by spirits, but by the survival reflexes of your ancient ancestors. So the next time you see a smile in the clouds or a face watching from your wallpaper, don't be alarmed. It's not your imagination running wild. It's your brain protecting you from the terror of randomness by convincing you there's something, someone, there. Imagine watching a roulette wheel spin. Red, 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 red. Your breath catches. You say, black is due. But what if that feeling isn't insight, but illusion? This is the gambler's fallacy, a trap our brains fall into when faced with chance. It feels logical. It feels inevitable. But it's a lie. Random events have no memory. The roulette wheel doesn't know its past. Each spin is a new coin toss, 50-50, again and again. But the mind rebels. It expects fairness, it demands balance, and so we chase. We believe loss must bring a win. That failure will somehow summon success. It happens in casinos, yes, but also in life. I've had so much bad luck. Something good must come next. But randomness is not justice. It is chaos, indifferent and exact. In 1913 at the Monte Carlo casino, the roulette wheel landed on black 26 times in a row. People watching lost their fortunes, each convinced that red had to be next. It wasn't. The wheel had no memory. But the people did. Their brains made a story, then bet their lives on it. This fallacy costs more than money. It costs peace, clarity, judgment. It distorts how we see risk, how we interpret luck, how we handle fate. In truth, you are never due for anything. You are only ever standing at the edge of possibility, staring into the void of chance. The antidote is awareness, understanding that streaks happen, that randomness clusters, that the universe is not a scorekeeper. So next time your gut says, "I'm owed a win," stop. Ask yourself, is that logic, or is that desperation wearing a mask? Because if you listen too long, that whisper turns into a scream, and the house always wins in the end. The fallacy doesn't just fool gamblers, it fools anyone who confuses chaos for cosmic fairness. What if the power you feel is just a trick? Imagine pressing a button, flipping a switch, or choosing a lottery number, believing you've influenced the outcome. But in truth, nothing you did mattered. This is the illusion of control, a deeply rooted psychological bias where we believe our actions affect events that are actually governed by chance, and we all fall for it. In one classic study, participants were asked to press buttons while lights randomly blinked. Many insisted they had figured out a pattern, when, in reality, the buttons weren't connected to anything. Another experiment gave people a fake control switch during a gambling task. Despite being useless, people felt more confident and bet more aggressively when they believed they were in charge. This illusion isn't stupidity. It's survival. Humans evolved to detect patterns, because in a dangerous world, missing a cause and effect link could mean death. The problem? We now see connections everywhere, even where none exist. Casinos, stock markets, even elevators play on this bias. Press the close door button. Nothing happens. But you feel empowered, because the brain craves agency more than truth. Even professional athletes fall for it, wearing lucky socks, following superstitions, or mimicking past behaviors that coincided with success. We'd rather be fooled into thinking we control fate than admit we're passengers in chaos. So, next time you push the button, was it power or a comforting lie? What if morality was influenced not by your values, but by the room's temperature? Imagine standing in a cold, sterile office. Your thoughts are clear, precise, almost surgical, but something's missing. You hear a colleague share a painful story, and you nod, but don't feel much. Now imagine hearing the same story in a warm room. Suddenly you care, you feel, you connect. This isn't coincidence, it's biology. Studies in embodied cognition reveal that temperature alters our social judgments. In one experiment, participants holding a warm drink rated strangers as friendlier. Another showed colder environments led to harsher moral decisions. Even judges handed down stricter sentences in chillier rooms. Why? Because cold reduces activity in the brain's empathy centers, like the insular cortex, while enhancing regions tied to logic and detachment. This means cold boosts cognition, but dulls compassion. Your brain becomes a calculator. You analyze suffering instead of feeling it. And it's not just physical cold. Images of ice or frosty environments can trigger the same effect. You become emotionally distant, more prone to punish than understand. In cold, we favor structure over softness, principle over people. Now imagine world leaders negotiating peace in freezing halls, or doctors delivering life-altering news under flickering, cold lights. What if their choices, their empathy, their mercy depended on a thermostat? What if history turned cold before it turned cruel? You are not just a mind. You are a body interpreting temperature as truth. Next time you feel distant, unfeeling, ask yourself, is it my heart or just the cold around me? What if the clearest memory you have, the one you'd swear is etched in stone, is the most distorted of all? Imagine the day of 9/11, your first breakup, or the moment you heard life-changing news. You remember where you were, what you wore, maybe even the scent in the air. It feels permanent, but science says it's not. These are called flashbulb memories, vivid emotional snapshots your brain takes during shocking or intense events, and they are often wrong. In one study, people were asked to write down their memories immediately after the 9/11 attacks. A year later, many details had changed. Some said they were with friends when they were alone. Others added things that never happened. Yet, confidence stayed high. Even when shown their original words, most insisted their newer version was correct. Why? Because emotion hijacks memory. The stronger the feeling, the more we trust it. But feelings aren't facts. Your brain doesn't record. It reconstructs. It grabs fragments of sights, sounds, feelings, and fills in gaps. With flashbulb memories, it prioritizes emotion over accuracy. Each time you recall that day, the memory rewrites itself slightly, influenced by your mood, new information, even media. So that breakup scene you play in your head, the tears, the words, the silence, it may not have happened that way, but it feels real, so you believe it. These memories define you. But they are often mosaics of truth and invention. Flashbulb memories feel sacred. They're emotional anchors. But studies show even first responders and survivors misremember critical details. In the case of the Challenger explosion, over 40% of participants changed their story drastically within 2 years, yet remained certain that they were right. That's the danger. Confidence doesn't equal correctness. You remember the emotion, not the event. Memory becomes narrative, not evidence. What if the moment that shaped you, never happened the way you remember? What if the moment you made a mistake, stumbled, or said the wrong thing wasn't noticed by anyone at all? Imagine walking into a room with a coffee stain on your shirt. You feel it radiating like a beacon, convinced everyone sees it. But they don't. Not because they're blind, but because they're too busy worrying about their own coffee stains. This is the reverse spotlight effect. You think you're on stage, center focus. But in reality, everyone else believes the same about themselves. Your brain evolved to track how others perceive you. In early human groups, your reputation could mean life or death. Read the tribe wrong, and you were cast out. So, we developed hypersensitivity to others' attention. But in modern life, most people aren't watching you. They're drowning in their own self-conscious spirals. You trip and feel exposed. You mispronounce a word and replay it for days. But everyone else is rehearsing their own mistakes. They didn't even notice yours. In a famous study, college students wore embarrassing t-shirts into a crowded room. They guessed that over 50% of people noticed. The reality? Only about 10% did. Most weren't looking. They were thinking about themselves. That sting of embarrassment? It's often a solo performance. You're trapped in a mental theater with one actor and one audience. You. The irony is, while you fear judgment, everyone else is too caught in their own spotlight illusion to truly see yours. So, next time your voice cracks, your joke flops, or you say the wrong name, breathe. Chances are, no one noticed. The truth is freeing. While you're busy worrying how you look, everyone else is doing the exact same thing, and no one is watching. What if the universe didn't suddenly change, but your awareness did? Imagine learning a strange new word, like sonder or pareidolia. You've never heard it before. But then, like magic, it starts showing up everywhere. Books, headlines, conversations. It feels impossible. How could this obscure thing suddenly be everywhere? That's not coincidence. It's the frequency hallucination bias, also known as the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon. This cognitive glitch tricks you into thinking something is suddenly more common, when in fact, your brain just became hyper-aware of it. The moment you focus on a new concept, your brain tags it as important and starts filtering for it. It's like your attention spotlight has shifted, and now everything irrelevant fades into the background. You see it not because it's more frequent, but because now you're finally looking. Advertisers exploit this. Ever notice that after searching for a product, you start seeing it everywhere, on streets and ads, even overheard in conversations? That's not surveillance. It's perception recalibration. Your brain is constantly editing the world, emphasizing what it thinks matters and erasing what doesn't. This isn't just about words. It applies to faces, emotions, even coincidences. Your brain connects the dots, not because they appeared, but because it started looking for them. What you think is reality is often a curated feed of your thoughts. Once you notice something, your world conforms to it. What if the person you waved at was never real? Imagine walking through a crowd when your heart skips. You spot someone familiar. You're sure it's them. The walk, the eyes, the tilt of their head. But as they pass, your smile fades. It's a stranger. This is the doppelganger confusion effect. Your brain's uncanny habit of recycling familiar faces and pasting them onto strangers without your permission. Our brains are facial recognition machines, but they're not perfect. Instead of analyzing every new face from scratch, your brain runs shortcuts. It references stored facial templates, especially those you know well, and tries to match new faces to old memories. When lighting, angle, or emotional context aligns just right, it makes a snap judgment. You see someone who isn't there. This isn't just a glitch, it's deeply rooted in survival. Recognizing faces quickly helped early humans identify allies, threats, and kin. But speed came at a cost. Accuracy. Your brain would rather assume it saw someone familiar, and be wrong, than miss someone important. That's why the illusion feels so real. This effect explains why people report seeing deceased loved ones in crowds, or mistake strangers for old friends they haven't seen in years. It's not just memory, it's the emotional weight behind that face that tricks perception. What you see isn't always what's there. Sometimes, it's what you miss. What if the world isn't falling apart, but your brain is convinced it is? Imagine scrolling through news headlines. Every story screams chaos, crime, corruption, war, decay. You feel it deep in your gut. Things were better before, simpler, safer. But here's the truth. That feeling isn't based on reality. It's a cognitive distortion called decline bias, and it's hardwired into your mind. Decline bias makes us believe the present is worse than the past, even when facts say otherwise. Studies show people consistently rate today's youth as less respectful, society as less moral, and the future as bleak, despite objective improvements in health, literacy, technology, and global poverty. Why? Because your brain romanticizes the past, filters out the bad, and clings to memories stripped of pain. This distortion isn't just nostalgia, it's survival. Your brain evolved to focus on threats. Bad news grabs attention. Good news fades fast. Over time, you accumulate trauma, regret, fear, and assume the world shares your decline. You become emotionally biased, seeing progress as decay, even as life expectancy rises and violence decreases. Your perception becomes a mirror of your fears, not the facts. Now, imagine politicians using this to their advantage. Make things great again. We've lost our way. These aren't policies, they're psychological hooks. Fear sells. Simplicity comforts. Your mind, primed by decline bias, eats it up. But the truth is more complex. The world isn't ending. You're just seeing it through a distorted lens. The past wasn't perfect. The present isn't doomed. The danger isn't that everything's getting worse. It's that your brain needs it to feel that way. Imagine feeling your phone buzz in your pocket. You check it. Nothing. No message, no call, no alert, just silence. And yet, you felt it. Not once, but again and again. This isn't a glitch in your phone. It's a glitch in your brain. Phantom phone syndrome is the sensation of receiving a notification that never came, and it's far more real and revealing than you think. Studies show nearly 90% of people have experienced this illusion, especially those who check their phones frequently. Your brain, trained by repetition, begins to expect vibrations. It learns the rhythm, the pressure, the context. And when reality doesn't provide it, your brain supplies it. This is sensory expectation overriding actual input. It's the same mechanism that makes you think you hear your name in a crowd or feel your limb move after amputation. The brain fills in blanks with habit-driven assumptions. You've built a neural circuit so efficient, it no longer needs external triggers. Your brain predicts the buzz, and your skin responds. Phantom sensation born of modern addiction. The more emotionally charged the device, the stronger the illusion. If you're waiting for a message from someone important, the brain heightens its sensitivity. It doesn't want to miss it, so it invents it. And here's the catch. The more we rely on our phones to stay connected, the more our brains misfire in their absence. It's not just habit, it's identity reinforcement. You're not just checking your phone. You're checking for affirmation, belonging, urgency. These phantom alerts reveal how deeply we've rewired our nervous systems around digital connection. It's a form of conditioned hallucination, where dopamine anticipation meets tactile expectation. You didn't just imagine it, you rehearsed it again and again until your body started performing without a cue. So next time your pocket twitches, ask yourself, was it a message or a memory your brain was desperate to feel again? What if everything you believed wasn't based on truth, but on trust? Imagine hearing a scientist say a new chemical is safe, or a doctor insists a drug is effective. You nod, you accept, you believe. But what if there's no real evidence, only reputation? This is the argument from authority, the cognitive shortcut where we accept statements as true simply because they come from someone we think knows more. In ancient times, trusting elders or chiefs could mean survival. Expertise wasn't questioned, it was honored. That instinct stayed with us. Today, a confident tone, a polished title, or a best-selling book makes us listen without doubt. A white coat becomes a symbol of truth. A podium becomes a throne. We stop asking for proof. We forget to look deeper. History doesn't forgive this blind spot. Doctors once promoted cigarettes. Scientists supported eugenics. Psychiatrists labeled homosexuality a disorder. These weren't fringe opinions. They were institutional, publicly accepted. Authority said it, so it must be true. Even the Challenger space shuttle disaster was linked to authority bias. Engineers warned of flaws, but decision-makers ignored them. But truth doesn't care about credentials. An expert can be wrong, or biased, or bought. Sometimes, the louder the voice, the more hidden the agenda. When we place trust above evidence, we make belief easy, but thinking dangerous. So the next time an expert speaks, pause. Ask, What is this based on? Where's the data? Who gains from my agreement? Because truth is not inherited, it's earned, tested, challenged. And even the wisest voice, left unquestioned, can become a weapon. Never surrender your critical mind, not even to the ones who sound the most certain. The wall of familiarity. What if the world around you didn't grow dull, you just stopped noticing it? Imagine walking the same street every day. At first, every crack in the sidewalk, every flicker of sunlight through leaves feels alive. But weeks pass, your brain adapts. Those same details blur into the background. This isn't boredom, it's a neurological phenomenon. Your brain builds a wall around what it already knows, and edits it out. It's called habituation. Your sensory system filters out repeated stimuli to conserve energy. The ticking clock, the hum of a refrigerator, the colors of your childhood room. They're still there, but your brain flags them as irrelevant. What once amazed you, your partner's laugh, a bird's wings, even your own hands, becomes invisible behind the wall of familiarity. It's why travelers feel awe in new cities, while locals walk by wonders without blinking. Their brains haven't had time to mute the novelty. Beauty, it turns out, isn't missing. It's just been silenced by your own mind. Neuroscience shows the prefrontal cortex plays a role in dampening responses to routine stimuli. This helps us focus on threats, changes, or opportunities. But the cost? We become blind to the richness we live inside. This effect shows up in relationships too. You stop noticing how kind someone is, how much effort they give, until it's gone. To break the wall, treat the familiar like a stranger, because hidden behind the everyday is everything you've forgotten how to love. What if time didn't move at a constant speed, but bent to your emotions? Imagine waiting 5 minutes in silence. Every second drips like a faucet. Now imagine laughing with friends. An hour evaporates. Same clock, different reality. This is the time perception glitch, where emotion becomes your true clock, and there is no universal now. Science confirms this strange truth. The brain doesn't have a single timekeeper. Instead, it estimates time based on attention, memory, and emotion. When you're stressed or afraid, your brain floods with adrenaline, making moments feel longer. That's why car accidents seem to unfold in slow motion. Your senses sharpen, and the mind records more data, so it assumes more time has passed. But when you're relaxed, happy, or distracted, your internal clock skips beats. Time flies because your brain collects fewer timestamps. Studies even show depressed people experience time as crawling, while joyful people feel days disappear. Boredom stretches minutes, anxiety distorts hours, and trauma can fragment time completely. In truth, your watch doesn't rule time, your feelings do. The ticking you hear is not from the world, but from your nervous system interpreting experience. Now imagine the implications. Prisoners in isolation lose all track of duration. Children recall summers as endless because their young minds encode more novelty. As we age, time speeds up because fewer moments feel new. Emotional routine compresses memory. What if aging itself is just the shrinking of emotional time? What if reality isn't timed by clocks, but by the heartbeats we remember? What if time's true shape is not linear, but felt, stretched, bent, and burned into memory? What if the moments you felt most certain were the ones where you were furthest from the truth? Imagine a pilot, confident in their instruments, guiding a plane straight into a storm because one dial was faulty. Or a student, confidently bubbling in the wrong answers, convinced of their brilliance. This isn't irony. It's the scientifically backed phenomenon known as the confidence-accuracy disconnect. The more certain you feel, the more likely you are to be wrong. Your brain mistakes confidence for competence. Studies show that the least knowledgeable often feel the most sure. It's not stupidity. It's miscalibrated self-awareness. Cornell researchers exposed this in what's now known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. Those performing in the bottom quartile believed they were near the top. Their certainty wasn't arrogance, it was illusion. We crave certainty like a drug. In arguments, decisions, even love, we trust that bold voice in our head. But that voice lies. That's why eyewitnesses swear by false memories, and why gamblers feel lucky just before they lose. Confidence is not a compass to truth. It's often a smokescreen, disguising doubt and error as clarity. Ironically, those who know more often hesitate. True experts question, revise, and remain open. Doubt is not weakness. It's the sign of a mind still learning. So, next time you feel absolutely, undeniably sure, stop. That sensation might not be clarity. It might be your brain whispering a beautifully crafted lie. Confidence is not the absence of doubt. It's often its perfect disguise, and it could cost you everything. Imagine walking through a tunnel where the only things that glow are the ones you already believe. Everything else, conflicting facts, uncomfortable truths, alternative views, vanish into darkness. You think you're seeing clearly, but you're trapped in a loop. Welcome to the confirmation tunnel. Confirmation bias is one of the most powerful cognitive distortions. It doesn't just influence what you believe, it changes what you see. Your brain is wired to protect your worldviews. It scans reality not for truth, but for agreement. When you read an article, watch the news, or scroll your feed, your mind highlights what fits and quietly deletes what doesn't. It feels like reality, but it's a curated illusion. In one experiment, participants were given mixed data about a political issue. Instead of analyzing it fairly, most clung to the parts that confirmed their stance and ignored the rest. They left more convinced, not because they learned more, but because their brains filtered the information like a biased editor. The danger? You build an echo chamber inside your skull. You begin to think your beliefs are common sense, obvious, undeniable, but they're not. They're the result of selective attention and emotional investment. Even memory is warped, recalling supportive evidence more clearly and forgetting contradictions. Every argument becomes proof. Every doubt gets buried. You start seeing enemies in nuance, threats in facts, betrayal in compromise. The confirmation tunnel doesn't just narrow your thinking, it reshapes your entire emotional reality. You feel smarter when you agree, safer when you conform, and angrier when challenged. But that anger, it's not clarity, it's defense. Your brain isn't seeking truth, it's defending identity. That's why logic often fails, because belief isn't about facts, it's about self. So, next time you feel absolutely certain, ask yourself, are you walking through the world or just through your own glowing tunnel? What if the most obvious thing in the room was the one you never saw? Imagine being so focused on counting how many times a basketball is passed that you completely miss someone in a gorilla suit walking through the scene. It sounds absurd, but in the famous invisible gorilla experiment, nearly half of the viewers missed it entirely. Not because they were blind, but because they weren't looking for it. This is inattentional blindness, your brain's eerie ability to ignore what it doesn't expect. You think you're seeing the full picture, but awareness is narrow, almost cruelly so. Your focus acts like a spotlight on a dark stage, bright where it shines, but pitch black everywhere else. If your attention isn't aimed at something, you might not see it at all, even if it's massive, even if it's moving, even if it's absurd. This isn't failure, it's efficiency. The brain receives too much input to process all at once, so it filters, it prunes, it selects, and sometimes it deletes. That deletion can be deadly. A driver turns into traffic and never sees the motorcyclist. A surgeon overlooks a tool left inside a body. A pilot ignores a blinking warning light. Not because they're reckless, but because their attention was somewhere else. And here's the chilling truth. If something doesn't fit your expectations, your brain might erase it completely. You don't see what's real, you see what you're told to expect. A world shaped not by truth, but by tunnel vision. So ask yourself, what else have you missed? A danger? A betrayal? A miracle? What truths pass through your field of vision unnoticed? Inattentional blindness isn't just a psychological glitch, it's a gatekeeper of your reality. And every day, it decides what gets in and what vanishes without a trace. What if truth could be manufactured, not by evidence, but by echo? Imagine hearing a strange claim. Goldfish have a 3-second memory. It sounds doubtful, but then you hear it again and again, from friends, from media, from school. Eventually, you stop questioning. It feels true now, not because it is, but because it's familiar. This is the illusory truth effect. It's one of the most dangerous cognitive distortions we face. Your brain equates fluency with accuracy. The more often you hear something, the easier it is to process. And that ease becomes mistaken for truth. It bypasses logic and sneaks into belief. In one experiment, participants were shown false statements repeatedly over weeks. Even when warned they were lies, many began to accept them as fact, just because they had heard them before. The lie didn't change. Your brain did. Advertisers use this. Politicians weaponize it. Misinformation spreads not because it's convincing, but because it's constant. Repetition reshapes reality, and your brain, always looking for shortcuts, accepts the repeated message over the verified one. Emotion, repetition, and confidence build a powerful illusion of certainty. Even scientific myths, like humans swallowing 8 spiders a year in sleep, survive through sheer repetition. The more you're fed the same ideas, the more they wall off your thinking. To resist, you must challenge ease. What feels right isn't always what is. What if you're walking down a crowded street and someone shoves past you without a word? Instantly, your brain snaps. Rude, selfish. But when you've done the same, late for a train or lost in thought, you tell yourself it wasn't personal. That split is the fundamental attribution error. Your brain blames others' behavior on their character, but excuses your own based on circumstance. Your friend forgets your birthday? Thoughtless. You forget? You were overwhelmed. Your mind shields your ego by assigning others faults they may not own. In the 1970s, psychologists showed people essays supporting controversial ideas. Even when told the writers were forced to take a side, readers still judged the writer's character based on those opinions. The mind doesn't just make snap judgments, it clings to them. This bias isn't small. It shapes prejudice, relationships, and conflict. The angry driver? A jerk. But what if he's rushing to a hospital? The cold coworker? Maybe she's just grieving. We invent stories to explain what we don't know, and usually we write villains. But what if we change that? What if, instead of what's wrong with them, we asked, what might they be going through? That shift doesn't make you weak, it makes you precise, because empathy isn't softness, it's clarity. And the more you practice it, the more accurate your view of the world becomes. What if the excuses you give yourself are wired by bias, not truth? Imagine failing a test and thinking, I've always had a bad memory, it's just my genetics. But when someone else fails, you think they're lazy, unmotivated, or just not trying hard enough. This isn't hypocrisy. It's a cognitive distortion called genetic attribution bias, and it changes how we judge failure, ours and theirs. Scientists have uncovered how this bias hijacks empathy. When we fall short, we turn to biology. Bad genes, poor sleep, chemical imbalances, it softens the blow. But when others struggle, we don't see their genetics, we see choices. We blame their character, not their chemistry. This creates a mental split. Excuses for us, judgment for them. Take addiction. We might say, he chose drugs. But if we suffer anxiety, it's, I have a serotonin imbalance. The same goes for depression, learning disabilities, even obesity. We defend ourselves with biology, but attack others with morality. This bias doesn't stop at individuals. It shapes policies, stigmas, and even justice. Research shows that when crimes are linked to genetic predisposition, people judge them less harshly. Yet, in daily life, we rarely extend that logic. We want others to do better, but want to be understood. The gap between blame and biology isn't science, it's self-protection. It's ego hiding behind science. So, next time someone stumbles, pause. Would you show yourself the same blame or the same grace? The answer reveals not who they are, but who you are, and whether truth or ego is behind your judgment. Because empathy isn't weakness, it's clarity, it's maturity, it's the only way we evolve together. Imagine watching two people in a heated argument. One suddenly pushes the other. It looks clear-cut until you realize the camera angle was hiding what came before. Now switch to a different view. Suddenly the aggressor looks like the victim. This isn't just editing, it's your brain being hijacked by camera perspective bias, a flaw in perception where angle shapes guilt. Studies in courtroom psychology have shown that video footage dramatically alters judgment based on point of view. If the camera is focused on the suspect, viewers are more likely to believe the confession is voluntary, even if it was coerced. Shift the angle to show both the suspect and the interrogator, and viewers judge it more critically. Why? Because your brain unconsciously attributes intention and truth to whoever dominates the frame. The closer the camera, the more personal and believable the subject feels. You don't just watch, you emotionally connect. The camera doesn't just capture reality, it manufactures it. In one landmark study, mock jurors watched identical footage of an interrogation. Those who saw the suspect's face were twice as likely to believe in guilt compared to those shown a side angle. Nothing changed except the viewpoint. Yet minds shifted. verdicts flipped. This means body cam footage, security videos, and even viral clips on social media can subtly guide public opinion, not through editing, but through framing. Camera perspective bias isn't about deception, it's about perception. Your brain fills in gaps, assigning blame based on visual cues. And once the emotion is triggered, outrage, sympathy, suspicion, it locks in, reshaping your sense of justice. We think cameras are neutral observers, but they're not. They're powerful storytellers, silent narrators shaping how guilt feels, not just how it looks. So next time you watch a video and think, it's all there on tape, pause. Ask yourself, are you seeing the truth or just the truth from one lens? What if your brain was never designed to make you happy, but simply to keep you alive? Imagine you get 100 compliments, but one insult ruins your entire day. Or recall how vividly you remember a painful moment from years ago, while joyful ones fade like smoke. That's not weakness, that's wiring. It's called negativity dominance, the brain's survival instinct to prioritize pain over pleasure, threat over safety. In evolution, ignoring danger meant death. So we became experts at remembering fear, storing it in high definition. A rustle in the grass could mean a predator. Fail to notice it once, and your story ends. That ancient urgency is still alive in your modern mind. Negative experiences trigger more brain activity, form deeper neural connections, and shape future behavior more powerfully than positive ones. You replay embarrassment, but forget praise. You fixate on a frown and overlook a smile. Your relationships suffer too. One harsh word echoes longer than a dozen soft ones, and none of this is your fault. It's how the amygdala, the brain's threat detector, is wired. It prioritizes bad news, elevates heart rate, and locks fear into memory like a brand on skin. Even in calm environments, your brain hunts shadows. It warns, don't celebrate too early, don't drop your guard. But this protective system becomes a prison. Over time, it fuels anxiety, self-doubt, and emotional exhaustion. It turns harmless comments into perceived attacks, and minor setbacks into lasting wounds. So the next time you wonder why joy slips away while pain clings so tightly, remember, it's not you, it's biology. Your brain is trying to save your life, even if it means never letting you rest. What if your body could heal because you believed it would? Imagine swallowing a pill you're told will ease your pain. Hours later, you feel better. But here's the twist. It was just sugar, no active ingredients. Still, your body responded, your pain eased. This is the placebo belief effect, where belief becomes biology. The placebo effect is one of the strangest, most powerful forces in medicine. It's not fake, it's not imagined, it's measurable. Placebos have been shown to lower blood pressure, reduce depression symptoms, and even trigger the release of dopamine and endorphins. Your brain, convinced of the cure, sends real signals to the body to begin healing. In one study, patients with Parkinson's disease were given a fake treatment. Brain scans revealed a genuine surge of dopamine, just from expectation. In another, sham surgeries led to real improvements, simply because patients believed they'd been operated on. The mind didn't pretend. It activated healing systems as if the lie were true. Belief doesn't replace medicine, but it can amplify it. The ritual of treatment, the doctor's coat, the sterile room, the pill's shape, all convince your subconscious that healing is happening, and the body follows. Not out of gullibility, but biology. This effect reveals a hidden power. Perception isn't just passive, it shapes reality. Healing, it turns out, starts with permission, and sometimes that permission begins with a harmless lie your brain turns into truth. What if your sense of who matters most wasn't based on love or logic, but geography? Imagine hearing about a disaster on the other side of the world. Thousands dead. You feel sadness, but it's distant, abstract. Now imagine a friend gets hurt nearby. One person, but it hits you like a punch. This is proximity bias. Your brain doesn't process distance logically. It processes it emotionally, viscerally, in waves of urgency. Proximity bias means people closer to you feel more real, more important, more urgent. Psychologically, your empathy is spatial. A stranger suffering next door can move you more than an entire nation in pain across the ocean. It's not cruelty. It's a cognitive shortcut. The brain evolved in small tribes. Those near you were your survival network. Those far away, a blur, a whisper beyond the horizon. Neuroscience supports this. Brain scans show heightened emotional activity when subjects view suffering in physically close contexts. Meanwhile, faraway tragedies activate analytical regions instead. You mourn statistics with your head. You mourn neighbors with your heart. And that gap between head and heart defines how the world feels to you. Now think about politics, charity, even media. News focuses on local crime over distant genocide. You care more about a neighbor's job loss than a foreign famine, and algorithms feed you nearby outrage because it grips you harder. But the world is not small anymore. Your empathy doesn't scale naturally. You have to fight for it, because the far away aren't less human. They're just less visible to your emotional map. And your map is not the territory. It's just the path your neurons learn to trace. What if your need for answers was actually the thing that deceives you most? Imagine reading a mystery novel but never reaching the final chapter. Your brain hates that. It aches for resolution, even if that resolution is a lie. This is the closure craving illusion, a mental trap where your mind will invent conclusions just to escape the discomfort of the unknown. We are wired to finish stories. Incomplete arcs feel like cognitive itches. That's why conspiracy theories thrive. They offer answers, even false ones, when reality stays murky. It's why people blame innocent strangers when tragedies strike. Our brain says, I need to know why. And if the truth isn't available, it builds a substitute from scraps of memory, emotion, and fear. This illusion plays out in relationships too. Ghosted by someone? Your brain crafts narratives. They met someone else. Or, I did something wrong. It doesn't matter if it's true. It only matters that the loop is closed and the ache is silenced. Scientists call this closure need, a cognitive bias rooted in the brain's reward system. Studies show people would rather accept a wrong answer than sit with ambiguity. In experiments, participants filled in blanks with false information rather than admit they didn't know. We would rather be wrong than unsure. That's how badly we crave endings. But here's the cost. When you rush to close the loop, you might close it around a lie. False memories, bad decisions, shattered trust, all born from that need to feel finished. So next time your brain demands resolution, pause. Can you sit with the silence? Can you live without knowing and still move forward? That's not weakness, that's mastery. Imagine walking through a city street. You notice a billboard that echoes your opinion, a stranger's glare that confirms your fear, a piece of trash that fits your anger. But did you see the smile from the barista? The helping hand on the corner? Or did your mind skip over them because they didn't match your mood? This is selective perception bias, where emotion edits attention and mindset controls what you see. Your brain can't process everything, so it filters. And that filter isn't objective, it's emotional. If you're anxious, you'll notice threats. If you're confident, you'll see opportunity. The same reality is perceived differently depending on your internal state. You don't just see the world, you see your world, shaped by how you feel. In one classic experiment, participants watched a football game between rival teams. Each side swore the other was dirtier, more aggressive, more unfair, but they all watched the same footage. Their biases highlighted what fit and deleted what didn't. Their mood shaped their perception. Selective perception doesn't just shape opinions, it changes memory. You'll remember being ignored, not the time someone smiled. You'll replay rejection, not kindness. The negative becomes sharper when you expect it, and the positive fades when you're not looking for it. Your brain isn't lying, it's just overwhelmed. It picks what feels relevant, but relevant doesn't mean real. Sometimes the world isn't hostile or cold. Sometimes it's your lens that's clouded. This bias doesn't only distort your reality, it reinforces it. The more you believe something, the more your brain filters the world to prove you right. It becomes a self-fulfilling vision. You don't just have thoughts, you begin to live inside them, surrounded by selective evidence your own mind constructed. So next time you're convinced everyone's against you, or the world is confirming your worst fear, pause. Is it truth, or just what your mood wants you to see? What if your memories weren't built from what actually happened, but from what you dreamed might have happened? Imagine waking up with a vivid image in your mind, a conversation, a place, a betrayal. It feels so real that hours later, you're still reacting to it. But slowly, doubt creeps in. Did it actually happen? Or was it just a dream? This is sleep-induced misremembering, where dream fragments sneak into your waking memory and quietly blur the truth. During REM sleep, your brain reactivates emotional circuits and rewires experiences. It combines recent events, buried fears, and imagined futures into surreal stories. These aren't stored in a dream folder, they're mixed with everything else. And when you wake, your brain doesn't always label the source. It just stores the story. This is why you might recall someone saying something they never did, or accuse someone of doing something that only happened in your sleep. The emotional weight of the dream gives it credibility. And because memory is reconstructive, not recorded, your brain fills in the blanks with dream-born fiction. People have confessed to crimes they only dreamed about. Others have fallen in love, started fights, or made life decisions based on phantom memories. Couples have broken up over words never spoken, except in sleep. A sibling forgiven for a gesture they never made. A scar that exists only in the mind. It's not madness, it's misplacement. Your mind is trying to protect and process, but sometimes it can't tell reality from rehearsal. And when emotion binds a dream to memory, illusion becomes indistinguishable from truth. So, next time you're haunted by a memory, pause. Did it happen? Or did you dream it into being? Because in the theater of the mind, even illusions can leave scars that feel real. What if your brain rewrote the truth just to protect your pride? Imagine being told you're wrong about a memory, a belief, or a decision you made. Instantly you feel resistance. You push back, find excuses, twist details, not because you're dishonest, but because your ego has slipped into the driver's seat. This is the ego preservation glitch, a cognitive malfunction where your sense of self rewrites reality to avoid feeling flawed. The human brain craves coherence. It wants to believe it's consistent, smart, and justified. But when new facts threaten that image, it doesn't update. It defends. You recall memories differently. You downplay mistakes. You argue harder, even with mounting evidence. Studies show that when people are presented with proof that contradicts their beliefs, the emotional parts of the brain activate, especially the amygdala. The threat isn't the fact. It's the feeling of being wrong. This glitch runs deep. It fuels political division, personal grudges, and social friction. It's why two people can look at the same data and come to opposite conclusions. The ego filters information through identity, not objectivity, and logic bends around it. Psychologists call this motivated reasoning. Your brain isn't looking for truth, it's looking for comfort. This bias doesn't make you broken, it makes you human. But the fix starts with one question. Is this about truth or about me? What if you believe something, not because it's true, but because you've heard it so many times your brain gave up? Imagine a phrase like, money can't buy happiness, or crime is out of control. You've heard them everywhere, in ads, news, conversations. Eventually they feel true, not because of evidence, but because repetition rewires your judgment. This is the repetition bias effect, where the mind confuses familiarity with truth, and familiarity feels like safety. Psychologists call it the illusory truth effect. In one study, participants rated repeated false statements as more believable than new ones, even when they knew the facts. The more you hear something, the easier it is for your brain to process. And what's easy to process feels safe, feels right. Your brain takes the shortcut. If it's familiar, it must be true. Logic steps aside. This is why propaganda works, why mantras sink in, why jingles from childhood live forever in your head. Your neural circuits fire faster with repetition. Over time, the repeated idea becomes a groove etched into the mind. It doesn't matter if it's false. Your memory doesn't care about accuracy. It cares about efficiency and survival through pattern recognition. Now, imagine the power of this. Politicians repeating slogans. Advertisers hammering taglines. Whole belief systems built on repetition, not reality. And you, thinking you're immune when you're not. The next time something feels true, pause. Ask, do I know this or have I just heard it too much? Because truth isn't always loud, but lies often are, and the brain, without noticing, mistakes the echo for a fact. What if your very first guess, no matter how random, could hijack every decision you make afterward? Imagine walking into a store and seeing a jacket priced at $500. You'd likely scoff. But then you see another jacket for $250, and suddenly it feels like a bargain. That's not logic. That's anchoring bias. Anchoring is a psychological phenomenon where the first number you see or hear plants itself in your mind and pulls every future thought toward it, even if it's arbitrary, even if it's wrong. It doesn't matter. Once the anchor drops, your brain builds around it like scaffolding, warping everything that follows. In a famous experiment, participants spun a wheel that was rigged to stop at either 10 or 65. Then they were asked how many African countries are in the UN. Those who landed on 65 guessed much higher than those who saw 10. The number on the wheel had nothing to do with Africa, but it shaped the answer anyway. That's the grip of anchoring. Anchoring infects everything. Salaries, house prices, test scores, even punishment in courtrooms. Judges exposed to higher suggested sentences often give harsher penalties, even if they know the suggestion was random. The first figure becomes the frame. It's hard to escape its pull. Your brain likes reference points. It hates floating in uncertainty. So it grabs the first number it sees, not because it's right, but because it's there. Once it settles, everything else bends around it like gravity. Anchors don't just hold ships. They hold minds, decisions, and sometimes entire lives. So next time you make a decision, ask, what anchor am I stuck to? Because if you don't choose your first number wisely, someone else already has. What if knowledge became a trap? Imagine you've mastered something, driving, coding, even tying a shoelace. Now try explaining it to a child. You stumble, not because you don't know, but because you've forgotten what it's like not to. That's the curse of knowledge. Once you understand something deeply, you lose the ability to imagine the confusion of those who don't. Your brain overwrites the learning path, replacing it with obvious shortcuts and silent assumptions. In a Stanford study, participants tapped rhythms of familiar songs like Happy Birthday, while others guessed the tune. Tappers predicted half would get it right, but only 1 in 40 did. Why? Because when you hear the song in your head, it seems unmistakable. But without that inner soundtrack, it's just meaningless tapping. The knowledge creates an invisible gap between experience and expression. This gap infects everything. Teachers baffled by students' confusion, designers wondering why users get lost, and leaders assuming their team just gets it. You explain less, assume more, and misjudge clarity. You're not arrogant. You're cursed. And this curse blinds you to how hard the journey to understanding really is. To escape, you must reverse time. Remember the frustration before you got it. Ask, not assume, break things down, test for understanding, and listen to the silences. Speak with the patience of someone guiding a hand in the dark. The real genius isn't in knowing, it's in bridging that gap. Because true wisdom isn't just holding light, it's learning how to pass the flame without burning the hand that reaches for it. That's how minds truly meet, through empathy, not expertise. What if the truth was too complicated for your brain to believe? Imagine being presented with a deeply layered explanation for a strange event. Scientific, logical, even true. But instead, your mind drifts towards something simpler. A guess. A myth. A clean cause. This is overkill avoidance. Your brain's instinct to reject complexity, even when it's accurate, in favor of something easier to digest. We're wired for survival, not nuance. In a dangerous world, speed mattered more than accuracy. If a rustle in the bushes might be a tiger, you didn't need to know about wind patterns or predator migration. You just ran. The simpler the story, the faster the decision. And that bias still lives in us. Today, that instinct clashes with modern reality. Climate change isn't caused by one thing. It's thousands of interlocking systems. Pandemics emerge from layers of biology, behavior, and ecology. Economic collapses unfold from years of decisions, policies, and global entanglements. But your brain doesn't want the whole web. It wants a single thread, a villain, a scapegoat, a lie it can remember. This is why fake news spreads faster than peer-reviewed science, why conspiracy theories gain traction. They shrink the chaos. They offer one enemy, one reason, one fix. It feels comforting, it feels certain. But it's wrong. Overkill avoidance isn't about ignorance, it's about efficiency. Your brain is trying to conserve energy, but when it avoids complexity, it sacrifices truth. And the world doesn't run on easy stories. So, the next time a simple answer feels too perfect, pause. The truth might weigh more, but it's what the world is actually built on. And carrying it is the price of understanding. What if no one is really watching you? Imagine tripping on the sidewalk, spilling coffee, or saying something awkward. Your face burns. You replay it for hours. You think everyone noticed, judged, remembered, but here's the truth. They didn't. This is the spotlight effect, a psychological illusion that makes you believe you're being observed more than you actually are. In reality, most people are too focused on themselves to pay attention to your flaws. Studies show that we consistently overestimate how much others notice our appearance, our mistakes, even our successes. In one experiment, participants were asked to wear an embarrassing t-shirt into a room of strangers. Afterward, they guessed that half the room had noticed. The real number? Barely a quarter. Why does this happen? Your brain lives behind your eyes. It sees the world from your center. So, naturally, it feels like the world sees you the same way. But it doesn't. Everyone is trapped in their own spotlight, just like you. The spotlight effect doesn't just cause embarrassment. It fuels anxiety, prevents risk-taking, and keeps people from expressing themselves. Even when people do notice, they rarely remember. What feels like a spotlight is usually just a flicker in someone else's day. You're not being judged, you're being filtered out. And that's not rejection. It's liberation. Perfection isn't required. Freedom begins the moment you stop performing for a crowd that isn't even looking. G to conserve energy. But when it avoids complexity, it sacrifices truth. And the world doesn't run on easy stories. So the next time a simple answer feels too perfect, pause. The truth might weigh more, but it's what the world is actually built on, and carrying it is the price of understanding. What if the person you admire isn't kind, smart, or honest? They just look like they are. Imagine meeting someone with a symmetrical face, confident posture, and a warm smile. You instantly think, they must be trustworthy, intelligent, maybe even successful. But where did that judgment come from? Not truth, just a glitch in your brain. This is the halo effect, where beauty bleeds into character and appearance hijacks logic. The halo effect is a well-studied cognitive bias. When someone has one appealing trait, like attractiveness, your brain fills in the blanks, assigning unrelated virtues. Good-looking people are assumed to be more competent, moral, and socially skilled. In reality, they might be none of those things. But evolution taught your brain to take shortcuts. Symmetry once meant health. Confidence once meant leadership. So your mind connects dots that don't belong together and fills in a fantasy. In courtroom studies, jurors gave lighter sentences to attractive defendants. In job interviews, prettier candidates were rated higher, even with identical resumes. And in daily life, we trust, forgive, and admire based on faces more than facts. We don't just see beauty. We assign goodness. The world rewards appearances long before it tests the truth behind them. Now, imagine how this shapes politics, media, even your relationships. You're not seeing clearly. You're seeing through a filter evolution built to save time, but now distorts everything. The halo blinds you, and the danger isn't just misjudging others. It's never realizing how wrong you were. The next time you admire someone instantly, pause. What if it's not them you're seeing, but your brain flattering its own illusions? What if your brain exaggerated the value of what just happened, simply because it happened last? Imagine watching the news and seeing a plane crash. Suddenly, flying feels terrifying, even though statistically, it's still the safest way to travel. That's recency bias, a cognitive trap where the last thing you saw, heard, or read hijacks your judgment. Our brains don't sort by truth, they sort by availability, and nothing feels more available than the thing you just experienced. That's why one bad review can ruin a product in your mind, even if thousands were positive. It's why we fear rare tragedies and ignore long-term threats. Recency sticks, and it sticks hard. In a study, jurors who heard emotional testimony last were more likely to convict, regardless of the full evidence. The timing changed the weight, and in relationships, a single recent argument can eclipse years of connection. Your mind says, "This just happened. It must matter more." It shouts louder, so we believe it must be true. We act on echo. Recency bias loops when your decisions reinforce the bias. You see a scary headline, avoid the activity, then feel safer, which convinces you the fear was right. But the truth? It was just recent. Not more important. Just louder in memory. The brain mistakes nearness for urgency and certainty. This bias makes us reactive, impulsive. It clouds our perception of trends, people, even ourselves. You think you're failing because of what happened today, ignoring years of effort that led you here. So, next time something feels urgent or important, ask yourself, is this real significance or just recent noise? The answer may set you free from a loop you didn't know you were trapped in. Imagine cutting someone off in traffic. You tell yourself you were late, distracted, or stressed. There's a reason, a backstory, a context. But when someone cuts you off, you call them reckless, rude, maybe even dangerous. You don't imagine their story. You define their character. That's the actor-observer bias, the tendency to see our own actions as situational, but others' actions as personality. We see ourselves in motion, inside a movie with emotion, history, and cause, but we see others in snapshots, frozen, judged, and labeled. If you trip, it's the floor. If they trip, they're clumsy. If you snap at someone, it's a bad day. If they snap, they're toxic. In one classic study, participants watched the same conversation from different camera angles. Those who saw the actor's face blamed them more. Those who saw the listener's face reversed their judgment. Just changing the angle flipped the cause. Why? Because when we're the actor, we see our surroundings. When we're the observer, we see the person. This bias explains fights, misunderstandings, even prejudice. We give ourselves depth, but flatten others into stereotypes. It's easy to excuse your temper when you know the pressure behind it. It's harder to forgive theirs when all you see is their reaction. The result? A world of double standards. You narrate your own flaws as episodes in a larger journey. But when it comes to others, you stop the film at one bad scene and judge the whole character. This bias isn't just unfair, it's damaging. It reinforces distance, erodes empathy, and feeds conflict. You build compassion for your flaws, but punish others for theirs. The narrative becomes warped. They are careless. You are overwhelmed. They are cruel. You are misunderstood. The lens changes everything because you see their surface, but live inside your own mind. So next time someone stumbles, speaks sharply, or disappoints you, pause. Ask yourself, are you seeing a person or just a moment without their story? What if your emotions didn't start in your mind, but in your muscles? Imagine forcing a smile on a bad day, just to get through it. You think you're faking, but your brain doesn't. It sees the upturned lips, the engaged eye muscles, the familiar signals of joy, and responds. It sends out dopamine and serotonin, rewiring mood to match the motion. This is the masked emotion fallacy. The strange truth that sometimes emotion flows backward through muscle memory. We're taught that emotions produce expressions. You feel joy, so you smile. You feel anger, so you scowl. But neuroscience suggests it can happen in reverse. A smile can create joy. A scowl can summon irritation. The brain, constantly interpreting bodily feedback, fills in emotional blanks based on physical cues. In one study, participants held a pen between their teeth, unknowingly activating smile muscles. They rated cartoons as funnier than those who held the pen with their lips, engaging frown muscles. Another study showed posture affects self-esteem, stand tall, and confidence rises. Curl inward and insecurity deepens. It means you can hack your feelings by changing your face, your stance, your breath. But it also means the line between real and performed emotion is dangerously thin. People can wear a smile for so long, they forget they're hurting. Others laugh loudly, not because they're happy, but because they need to be. It's both empowering and unsettling. You can reshape your feelings, but you can also lose them beneath performance. So, next time you smile in the mirror, ask, are you expressing truth or painting over pain? The face isn't just a mask, it's a signal. And when you repeat the signal long enough, even your soul may start to echo it. What if half your brain was making up stories, and you believed every word? Imagine being asked why you did something, and without knowing the real reason, your mind invents one instantly. No hesitation. No awareness that it's a lie. That's the split self glitch, a deep quirk of your brain's wiring, where one hemisphere creates explanations, even when it has no access to the truth. In the 1960s, scientists studied patients who'd had their brain's corpus callosum severed, a surgery to treat epilepsy. With their left and right hemispheres no longer able to communicate, strange behaviors emerged. One side of the brain saw an image, the other, blind to it, was asked why they reacted. Instead of saying, I don't know, the patient made up a story and believed it. The left brain, known for language, acts as the interpreter. It needs to make sense of the world, even if it has to fabricate the answer. This isn't limited to split brain patients. All of us do it. We create coherent narratives from fragmented information. You justify choices after the fact. You explain emotions you didn't choose. You give reasons for gut instincts, but those reasons might be retrofitted lies. The interpreter doesn't like gaps, so it patches them with fiction. This internal narrator is confident, too confident. It explains your past, defends your choices, and tells you who you are. But your identity may be stitched together from assumptions. Your brain doesn't need truth, it needs consistency. What if you're not the voice of reason, but an echo chamber of your own mind? Imagine holding a strong opinion about politics, morality, even your favorite show. You assume most people probably agree with you. It feels obvious, right? But then someone disagrees, and it shocks you. That jolt is the false consensus effect, your brain's illusion that your beliefs are more universal than they really are. Psychologists discovered that people consistently overestimate how many others share their views. If you support a policy, you assume most intelligent people must too. If you dislike someone, you expect others do as well. This isn't confidence, it's projection. Your brain takes your experience and stretches it across humanity. But the world isn't your mirror, and your thoughts aren't a shared blueprint. This effect shows up in everything, from politics to ethics to social norms. In one classic study, participants were asked to make a choice, then predict how many others would do the same. Most believed their option was the majority choice, even when it wasn't. The brain mistakes familiarity for popularity. When you hear your own opinion often, whether from friends, feeds, or filtered news, you assume it's truth, not trend. Now imagine the danger. You stop asking questions. You silence dissent. You trust your gut over evidence. You defend bias as fact. And when disagreement appears, it feels like betrayal. But the truth is, you're not always in the majority. You're just trapped in a mental loop that feels like consensus. The next time you assume everyone thinks this, pause. They don't. You just thought louder than they spoke. What if your worst fear, that everyone knows how you feel, was actually an illusion? Imagine giving a speech and feeling your voice tremble, your hands sweat. You're sure everyone can see your anxiety, but they don't. That's the illusion of transparency, a bias that makes us believe our internal emotions leak out more than they do. We think our thoughts are visible, that discomfort paints itself across our face. But the truth is, others are terrible mind readers. Studies show people consistently overestimate how much others can detect their nervousness, guilt, or attraction. In one experiment, participants told lies and believed they were clearly obvious. Yet, observers rarely spotted them. This illusion isn't harmless. It makes social anxiety worse. You blush and think everyone notices. Your voice shakes, and you assume it's all anyone hears. But most people are too busy worrying about their own performance to notice yours. The spotlight you feel on yourself is a private projection. Even in relationships, the illusion causes damage. You assume your partner knows you're upset. So you don't explain, but they don't notice. And the silence builds walls. We expect others to decode our expressions, but they can't see what we feel unless we say it out loud. It's emotional charades, and nobody wins or knows they're playing. The illusion of transparency isn't proof that people understand you. It's proof that your brain wants to be understood so badly. It imagines it's happening. But clarity isn't automatic. It's a choice, a skill, a risk. So, the next time you feel exposed, remember, you're more hidden than you feel. If you want to be known, you have to speak your truth out loud. Imagine hearing a song you've never liked, yet over time, it starts to feel comforting. Or you see a logo on a store, and without knowing why, you feel safe shopping there. It's not quality guiding you, it's repetition. This is the mere exposure effect, a psychological trick where familiarity breeds trust. Your brain is wired to prefer what it recognizes. Even if something is neutral or unremarkable, repeated exposure makes it feel safer. It's not logic, it's biology. In evolutionary terms, what we see often hasn't hurt us yet, so it gets marked as safe. Comfort doesn't come from truth, it comes from exposure. This effect shows up everywhere. In advertising, the most repeated brand isn't always the best, but it is often the most trusted. In politics, the candidate with more face time feels more reliable, even if their policies are unclear. In music, you hum along to songs you once ignored. Repetition rewires taste. In one study, participants were shown random symbols. The ones shown more frequently were rated as more likable, even though they were meaningless. No context, no message, just repetition. And this isn't just about brands, it's about people. A face you see daily, even in silence, starts to feel familiar, and therefore trustworthy. That's why media presence builds loyalty, and why the unknown feels threatening, even if it isn't. That's the hidden power of repetition. It bypasses judgment and carves grooves in your trust. You don't notice it happening. You just wake up believing that what you've seen the most must be what's best. It's not persuasion. It's programming, not truth. Just frequency echoing itself into certainty. Familiarity doesn't mean value, it means comfort. And comfort can be deceptive. So, next time you trust a song, a slogan, or a face, pause. Do you trust it because it's good, or just because it showed up enough to feel like it should be? What if logic didn't decide what you believe, but belief decided what you call logical? Imagine being shown an argument that's flawed, but it supports your opinion, so you nod along. Then you see a perfectly valid argument, but it contradicts your view, and you instantly dismiss it. That's not fairness. That's the belief bias effect. Your brain's tendency to judge reasoning not by its structure, but by its conclusion. We like to think we're rational beings, logic-driven, objective, but in reality, belief often comes first. Then, like a clever lawyer, your brain builds arguments to defend the verdict it already wants. If the conclusion feels right, you don't scrutinize the path. If it feels wrong, you tear it apart, even when it's solid. In classic experiments, participants were more likely to accept logically invalid syllogisms if the conclusion aligned with their worldview, and more likely to reject valid reasoning if it didn't. It's not about logic, it's about emotional fit. Your beliefs become a lens, and anything that contradicts them is automatically distorted, dismissed, or erased. This is why debates feel personal, why facts bounce off convictions like rubber bullets off stone, because your brain isn't always seeking truth. It's seeking comfort, identity, safety, and it will defend them at the cost of accuracy. This bias shapes everything: political division, scientific denial, even who you trust or fear. It creates echo chambers where you only hear what agrees with you, and it silences curiosity before it ever speaks. So the next time an argument makes your stomach twist, don't ask, "Do I agree?" Ask, "Is the logic sound?" Because real thought isn't about feeling right, it's about being willing to be wrong, and truth begins where comfort ends. What if your memories weren't honest recordings, but edited highlights? Imagine going through a 2-hour movie. Most of it is boring, slow, uneventful, but one scene makes you laugh, and the ending leaves you emotional. Later, when asked how the film was, you say it was great. You've just experienced the peak end rule, a psychological shortcut, where your brain judges an entire experience based on its emotional peak and how it ended, not the full timeline. This effect isn't just about entertainment. It shapes how you remember vacations, relationships, surgeries, even conversations. In one study, patients who underwent painful medical procedures rated the experience more positively if the final moments were slightly less painful, even if the procedure itself lasted longer. Your brain doesn't average pain or pleasure. It bookmarks extremes. That's why a terrible trip can become nostalgic if it ended with a perfect sunset, or why a good relationship is remembered as toxic if it ended in betrayal. Your memory isn't a tape, it's a summary, edited for emotional clarity, not factual length. Marketers use this too. Customer experiences are engineered to leave a positive final impression, because that's what lingers. Likewise, we forgive long lines if the last moment of service feels rewarding. It also explains why endings matter more than we admit. You remember how it felt to leave, not how long you stayed. Real meaning isn't always in the peaks, it's in the depth between them. What if the catchiest song you know isn't stuck in your head by accident, but by design? Imagine hearing a jingle once, and hours later, it loops again, and again. Not because you love it, but because your brain can't let go. This is the earworm exploit, where music hijacks your mental processor through repetition, rhythm, and incompletion. Neuroscientists call this involuntary musical imagery. It's not about liking the tune, it's about how your brain processes patterns. Songs with simple melodies, upbeat tempos, and unresolved phrases trigger what's called the Zeigarnik effect. Your mind craves completion. So it repeats the song in a loop, hoping to resolve it. But earworms don't finish. They linger like puzzles with missing pieces that tease the mind into submission. Advertisers exploit this. They craft audio logos that stick. Think of "I'm loving it" or "Intel Inside." These aren't melodies, they're traps. And they work because music enters the brain's auditory cortex and emotional centers, bypassing logic. You don't remember them by choice. You remember them because you were outsmarted, hooked by design. Studies show stress, fatigue, and idle time increase the likelihood of earworms. That's why they strike during showers, walks, or when you're trying to sleep. Your mind, bored or unguarded, becomes vulnerable to loops. The song isn't just annoying, it's a hack. A viral code that replicates across memory. And the next time you find one stuck, don't ask, "Why can't I forget this?" Ask instead, "Who wanted me to remember?" Because the silence in your brain was valuable space, and someone filled it first. Digital ghost phenomenon. What if you sent a message, not to be answered, but just to feel something? Imagine typing out a text to someone who's no longer in your life. You know they won't respond. Maybe they blocked you. Maybe they passed away. Maybe they just stopped caring. But still, you send it. That's the digital ghost phenomenon, a modern form of grief, loneliness, and emotional memory disguised as communication. You aren't trying to start a conversation. You're chasing an echo, a reflection of a connection that once felt real. Psychologists say this isn't delusion. It's coping. Your brain reaches for ritual, and in the absence of closeness, it creates simulation. It mimics the motions of bonding, even when the line is dead. It's like lighting a candle at an empty altar. The person doesn't receive it, but you feel less alone. Some send messages to exes they'll never hear from. Others talk to lost loved ones in the silence of chats. Even social media memories become ghost portals, offering glimpses into digital afterlives and forgotten timelines that still haunt your feed. This illusion provides brief comfort, but it can also trap you. When the response never comes, the ache lingers. You wait. You refresh. You reopen old wounds. And yet, there's meaning in the attempt. A strange kind of healing in saying what was left unsaid. It's communication with the past, not the person. It's an act of self-soothing disguised as outreach. So, the next time you find yourself messaging the void, pause. Are you reaching for a person or for the feeling they once gave you? The answer may reveal the ghost you're really speaking to, and what part of you still hasn't let go of the connection you so deeply miss. Imagine deciding to buy something expensive, maybe a watch, a car, or a vacation. Deep down, you want it. It feels right. Later, you list reasons. It's reliable, good value, an investment. But those reasons didn't guide you. They followed you. That's the logic-emotion override. The tendency to decide with emotion, then use logic as cleanup. We like to think we're rational creatures, calculating pros and cons, weighing evidence, making the smartest choice. But neuroscience paints a different picture. The emotional centers of your brain fire first. The logical regions catch up only after a choice is already forming. You don't use logic to choose. You use it to defend what you've already chosen. In one study, people tasted identical wines labeled with different prices. The higher the price tag, the better they claimed it tasted, even though it was the same wine. Their brains literally lit up more with pleasure because their emotions responded to value, not flavor. Logic came later, dressed as reason. This bias shapes politics, relationships, even memory. You fall in love, then list the traits. You get angry, then explain why. You choose a side, then seek arguments to back it up. Logic becomes a tool of emotion, not its master, and it feels like truth. Because once you believe something, your brain filters reality to support it. Facts aren't evaluated, they're recruited. That's why two people can see the same evidence and reach opposite conclusions, because the emotion came first and the logic was shaped to fit. You think you're debating facts, but you're often defending identity. Rationality becomes theater. Emotion writes the script. Logic delivers the lines. The result? We feel convinced not because we're right, but because we're invested. So, next time you find yourself explaining your decision, ask, are you being honest? Or just building a story around a feeling you've already chosen to believe? What if the thing that shocked you most was something you already knew was coming? Imagine ignoring the red flags, dismissing the warnings, silencing that uneasy voice in your head. Then the disaster hits, And you say, I never saw it coming. But you did. You just didn't want to. This is predictable surprise blindness, when your brain avoids obvious danger because accepting it would cause discomfort. We're not built to stare into the storm. If a truth threatens your stability, your relationships, your job, your worldview, your mind quietly pushes it away. Not because it's hidden, but because it hurts. You don't forget the warning signs. You flinch away from them. This is why people stay in toxic relationships long after they've seen the truth. Why companies ignore financial collapse until it's too late. Why nations pretend climate tipping points aren't real. It's not ignorance. It's self-preservation through selective blindness. If acknowledging a danger demands painful action, the brain often chooses silence. In hindsight, the signs feel obvious. You remember the offhand comment, the strange behavior, the sick feeling in your gut. You tell yourself you should have known. But you did. You just didn't listen. And pretending not to know something is sometimes easier than facing what it means. Even airplane crashes often follow ignored warnings, alarms dismissed, patterns overlooked, signs suppressed, until it's too late. Predictable surprise blindness isn't stupidity. It's avoidance wired into our emotional core, but it comes at a cost: regret. So next time you feel that rising tension, that whisper of dread, don't brush it away. That discomfort may be your final warning before everything breaks. The truth doesn't always whisper. Sometimes it screams, and the earlier you listen, the softer it has to be. What if danger wore a familiar face? Imagine taking the same route to work every day, passing the same buildings, the same faces, the same silence. It feels safe because it's known. But safety, your brain believes, comes from predictability. This is the illusion of safety. A psychological blind spot where routine disguises risk, and the mind stops questioning what it sees too often. The brain loves patterns. It's wired to relax around the familiar. Repetition signals control, and anything outside that loop feels dangerous. But the reverse is also true. When something blends into your routine, your brain stops analyzing it. You overlook warning signs, you excuse strange behavior, you ignore slow shifts in tone or trust. Not because you're careless, but because your mental radar is asleep. History is full of this glitch. Accidents, betrayals, collapses. Many happen not because no one saw them coming, but because they looked too much like yesterday. Familiar risks are filtered out. In psychology, this is linked to inattentional blindness, when expectation blinds you to change. What hides in plain sight often does the most harm. This illusion is why people stay in harmful environments. The toxic job, the draining relationship, the unsafe neighborhood. If pain arrives in familiar packaging, it feels less threatening. The brain confuses history with safety. But real safety isn't about repetition, it's about awareness. What if your schedule is a beautiful lie? Imagine planning a project. You estimate it'll take 2 weeks. You feel confident, maybe even excited. But then reality hits. It takes 3 weeks or 4. You rush, cut corners, apologize. Still, the next time, you plan the same way. This is the planning fallacy. The brain's delusion that the future will go smoothly, despite all evidence to the contrary. Psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky coined the term. They found that people consistently underestimate how long tasks will take, even when they've done them before. You think this time will be different. You'll be faster, more focused. But you won't. Because the planning fallacy isn't about skill. It's about hope. Optimism clouds data. Emotion trumps history. Confidence overrides caution. You ignore past delays. You underestimate obstacles. You imagine your future self as superhuman, immune to fatigue, distraction, or chaos. But that self doesn't exist. Only the present you does. And the present you is bad at forecasting. You build plans on best-case fantasies while ignoring the pattern of your own life. In study after study, students said they'd finish papers early. They rarely did. Construction projects went over budget. Software launches missed deadlines. Always. Not because people are lazy, but because they're human, driven by desire, not data, motivated by ambition, not memory. Now, imagine your life as a calendar built on lies, a fiction of optimism. You're not failing. You're just planning wrong. The next time you set a deadline, double it. Then ask yourself, if I were giving advice to someone else, what would I say? Because you already know how long it will take. You just don't want to believe it. What if the past only feels clear because your brain edited it? Imagine a stock market crash, a breakup, or a world event. After it happens, people say, of course that was going to happen. But that's not memory, it's illusion. That's the hindsight trap. Your brain rewrites the story with false certainty, deleting the fear and doubt you once had. In real time, the future is fog. We weigh options. We hesitate. But once an outcome appears, the mind retrofits logic onto chaos. Suddenly the red flags seem brighter, the mistakes seem louder, and the path looks obvious. This isn't clarity, it's compression. A biased summary built to make you feel in control when the truth was always messier. Studies show we overestimate how predictable events were, especially after emotional ones. In one experiment, people were told a couple broke up. They immediately claimed they saw it coming. But another group, told they stayed together, said the signs pointed to that. Both believed they knew the truth. Neither did. Their minds simply picked whichever narrative matched the outcome. The hindsight trap is comforting. It makes the world feel organized, your judgment feel sharp. But it's dangerous too. It blinds us to how complex decisions really are. It makes you judge others unfairly, thinking they should have known better when they couldn't have. It fosters arrogance, not insight. So, the next time you look back and think, I knew it all along, stop. Try to remember how lost you felt before the answer arrived. That confusion was real. That uncertainty mattered. And admitting you didn't know doesn't make you weak. It makes you honest, aware, and more prepared to face the unknown tomorrow. Imagine standing in a courtroom. Two people give the same testimony. One is conventionally attractive, the other is not. You don't realize it, but you trust the beautiful one more, not because of what they said, but because of how they look. This is the beauty equal sign. Truth bias, the unconscious tendency to believe attractive people are more honest, competent, and moral, even when they're not. It's one of the oldest distortions in the brain. We associate physical symmetry with goodness. Sharp cheekbones, clear skin, a confident smile, they activate brain regions linked to reward, even trust. We don't just find beauty appealing, we find it believable. In one study, jurors were shown identical testimony delivered by actors of varying attractiveness. The attractive defendants were more likely to be acquitted, and when found guilty, received lighter sentences. The same crime, different face, different fate. This doesn't stop at courtrooms. It shapes hiring decisions, dating preferences, news anchors, influencers, even who we vote for. Good looks become a kind of credibility, a visual shortcut for truth. But beauty isn't honesty, symmetry isn't sincerity, and charm isn't character. We think we're judging content, but we're often reacting to a face. This bias is subtle, powerful, and almost invisible. It convinces you that attraction means accuracy, that looking good means being good. This bias begins early. Children rate attractive teachers as nicer. Adults assume good-looking people are smarter. It's not a conscious choice. It's emotional reflex. Evolution rewarded attraction, but today, it deceives judgment. We don't see through faces. We often stop at them. The result? We hand credibility to features, not facts, and call it truth. So, next time you find yourself believing someone just a little too easily, ask, am I trusting their words or just their symmetry? What if the stories you remember most were the ones least true? Imagine hearing a vivid tale, a brave hero, a cruel villain, a perfect twist. It sticks in your mind, lingers in your emotions. But later, you learn the facts were wrong. And still the story remains. This is the story over fact glitch. Your brain's tendency to remember narratives better than data, even when those narratives are false. We evolved as storytellers. Long before writing or science, we passed knowledge through stories. They had structure, emotion, meaning, a beginning, a middle, an end. The human brain craves that arc. It clings to it. So when facts are dry and fragmented, they vanish. But when facts are wrapped in story, they anchor to memory. That's why myths outlive documents. Why conspiracy theories feel more real than footnotes. A moving speech stays longer than a spreadsheet. A lie told with passion burns deeper than truth whispered flat. Even in courtrooms, jurors are swayed more by compelling stories than cold evidence. In politics, candidates who craft emotional narratives often win hearts, despite fact checks. In history books, complex realities are flattened into good versus evil, just so we can remember. Studies show that when facts and stories conflict, people often believe the story, even when told it's false, because it feels complete, human, emotional, and your brain is built for meaning, not precision. This isn't about stupidity, it's about survival. Story helped us remember danger, identity, belonging, but today, it's a glitch. Because in the mind's theater, a lie with good lighting can feel more true than the dullest truth. So ask yourself, do I believe this because it's real, or because it was told so well I wanted it to be? What if your phone wasn't a tool, but a shield? Imagine stepping into an elevator with a stranger. Silence stretches, you feel eyes, pressure, awkwardness. Instinctively, you reach for your phone. No messages, no notifications. Still, you tap, swipe, scroll, not because you need to, but because it protects you. This is the elevator pause effect, a social reflex where your brain fakes activity to escape discomfort. In uncertain social moments, tight spaces, waiting rooms, train stations, your mind seeks cover. The phone becomes armor. It says, "I'm busy," when you're really avoiding connection. Studies show that even when phones are off or irrelevant, people still grab them in awkward situations. It's not about utility. It's about social camouflage. Why? Because eye contact, silence, and proximity trigger vulnerability. You might feel judged or exposed, or responsible for breaking the quiet. The phone offers control, a way to anchor attention and signal disengagement. It's a tool your brain uses to regain comfort without confrontation. But this habit has a cost. It robs us of tiny, authentic moments. Glances, nods, spontaneous smiles. It turns human spaces into digital waiting rooms. And over time, the reflex deepens. Discomfort no longer becomes something to tolerate. It becomes something to mask. This effect reflects a deeper truth, our fear of social ambiguity. But by leaning into those moments, we recover something ancient: presence. What if your trust in science wasn't based on understanding, but on awe? Imagine hearing a claim wrapped in technical jargon. This compound increases cognitive output via synaptic potentiation. Sounds convincing, right? But what if it's nonsense? Your brain doesn't always check, it often surrenders. This is the science worship error, the illusion that complexity equals truth, and that intelligence hides behind big words. In one study, researchers added meaningless neuroscience terms to fake explanations. Participants rated them as more convincing than simple, accurate ones. Another experiment showed that adding a graph, even irrelevant, made an argument feel more credible. Your brain confuses detail with validity. If it sounds scientific, it must be smart, or so it seems. This bias is rooted in our reverence for authority. Science has earned trust, but that trust can be abused. Companies use pseudoscience to sell pills. Gurus invoke quantum to justify nonsense. People nod along, not because they understand, but because it sounds hard to understand. That confusion becomes submission. Complexity becomes camouflage, and complexity creates an illusion of depth. You're less likely to question what you don't grasp. You assume the experts did the work for you, but not all data is equal. Not all experiments are honest, and some findings are just fog dressed in numbers, built to impress, not inform. Now, imagine how this shapes your beliefs. You forward articles, buy supplements, trust opinions, all dressed in scientific drag. But the next time something sounds too smart to doubt, pause. Intelligence isn't how complicated it sounds. It's how well it holds up when stripped of its costume. What if the world you believe in isn't real, but carefully shaped to agree with you? Imagine scrolling your feed, reading the news, or even talking with friends. The opinions feel familiar, the facts feel obvious, but that's not clarity. It's confinement. That's the echo chamber creep, a slow, invisible drift into intellectual isolation. It doesn't happen overnight. Algorithms learn what you like, then show you more of it. Friends echo your values. News reinforces your beliefs. Dissenting views fade out. Not because you chose silence, but because the system curates it for comfort. It's not truth you're absorbing. It's a mirror. And the reflection grows more flattering with time and repetition, until difference fades. Studies show people surrounded by agreement become more extreme in their views. It's not just bias, it's amplification. Psychologists call it group polarization. The more we nod in agreement, the further we drift from balance. And the scarier part? It feels normal. The creep is subtle. You don't notice you've stopped hearing the other side. You don't notice your facts are filtered, your questions pre-answered. It's like living in a house with soundproof walls. Everything outside gets quieter until only your thoughts remain. This makes empathy harder. It makes truth feel like betrayal. You start to mistake comfort for accuracy, safety for understanding. And soon, anything that challenges your beliefs feels like a threat, not a signal to learn. So, next time everything you see feels right, pause. Ask, do I believe this because it's true or because it's familiar? The answer might reveal whether you're seeing the world or just your reflection in a coded cage. Imagine someone tells you they're exhausted, in pain, or barely holding it together, but they smile, they show up, they look fine. And somewhere in your mind, a quiet thought creeps in. It can't be that bad. This is the pain distance blur, the cognitive illusion where invisible pain feels less real and therefore less deserving of empathy. The farther removed you are from suffering, physically, emotionally, or visually, the harder it is to feel it. A broken bone in front of you commands care. A migraine, a panic attack, or chronic fatigue behind a calm face, it fades. Not because you're cruel, because your brain uses vision as verification. If it can't see it, it subconsciously doubts it. In one study, participants showed more empathy and donated more when shown images of suffering than when told statistics. Visual pain triggered emotional response. Numbers didn't. The abstract gets filtered. The unseen gets minimized. This bias shapes how we treat mental illness, disability, grief, and trauma. If the wound isn't visible, we assume it's minor or fabricated. We label others as dramatic, lazy, or weak because we can't witness their suffering. We trust the surface and ignore the storm beneath. But pain doesn't need to bleed to be real. Some people carry entire wars inside them and still go to work, smile in photos, and say, "I'm fine." It's easier to care when pain screams, but most pain whispers, and distance muffles it even more. We don't mean to overlook others, we just default to what's visible. But real compassion means listening past silence, seeing past smiles. Your attention can be medicine, and your doubt can be a wound. So, next time someone says they're hurting, even if they look okay, pause. Don't look for proof, look for presence, because empathy begins where visibility ends. What if you reach for your phone? Not to check anything, but because your brain told you to. No buzz, no ding, no notification, and yet your hand moves, your thumb swipes, your eyes scan. You weren't alerted. You weren't expecting anything, but you checked anyway. This is the phantom swipe habit, your mind's trained reflex to seek digital stimulation, even when nothing is there. It starts innocently. A message arrives, dopamine hits, your brain learns, check equals reward. So the loop begins. You check, you're pleased. Repeat. Over time, the brain stops waiting for the trigger. The behavior becomes autonomous. The swipe is the habit. The tap is the comfort. You scroll not for content, but for reassurance. Soon, the cue isn't a sound or light. It's an emotion. Boredom, loneliness, stress, silence. Your phone becomes a pacifier, a digital crutch. It soothes the moment with motion. You don't even notice you're doing it. It's like scratching an itch you can't feel. A phantom movement for a phantom need. Studies show that people check their phones over 300 times a day, many of those without a conscious reason. It's not just addiction, it's ritual. You're pulling a lever on a slot machine of meaning. Maybe this swipe, this notification, this refresh will tell you you're needed, visible, relevant. But most of the time, it's nothing. A news headline, a photo, a piece of someone else's life. The brain gets just enough reward to repeat the cycle again. The danger isn't the phone, it's what it's replacing. Reflection, stillness, real connection. So the next time your fingers twitch toward that screen, pause. Ask yourself, what am I really trying to feel? Because if your habit is louder than your need, it might be time to stop swiping and start listening to yourself. What if your beliefs were built on coincidence? Imagine seeing a product next to a smiling face, upbeat music, or scenes of success. You're not told it works. You're not given proof. But over time, your brain connects the two. Joy equals product. Trust equals brand. This is association creep, a psychological effect where repeated pairing makes unrelated things feel linked, regardless of logic. It's not just about ads. It's how the human brain learns. We're wired to notice patterns, even weak or accidental ones. If two things appear together often enough, your brain fuses them. And once linked, they're hard to separate. This happens in politics, media, relationships. A color reminds you of fear. A tone of voice triggers calm. A song becomes sadness. Not because of its sound, but because of what came with it. Advertisers exploit this constantly. They pair shampoo with romance, cars with power, perfume with desire. You don't buy the item, you buy the emotion. The brand never lies outright. It just repeats the pairing until the association feels natural. You say, "This feels right," not knowing your brain has been gently trained. Association creep also plays into stereotypes. If media repeatedly pairs certain groups with crime, or authority, or victimhood, those links become embedded, regardless of fact. Your brain starts to feel a pattern, even if it's misleading. Not every feeling of truth comes from truth. Some are just the residue of repetition. What if your anxiety wasn't weakness, but an ancient survival system firing at the wrong targets? Imagine your heart racing before a meeting, or your gut tightening over a late email. Your logical mind says, "This isn't life or death." But your brain doesn't care. It evolved to fear rustling leaves, not notification pings. This is the false alarm reflex. Your primal defense system misfiring in the modern world, confusing discomfort with danger. Your brain is wired for threat detection. Thousands of years ago, overreacting to a shadow could save your life. Better to jump at nothing than to ignore a predator. But in today's world, that system hasn't updated. The jungle has become traffic, deadlines, bills. But your amygdala, your fear center, still screams danger. And cortisol still floods your body like you're being hunted in the dark. Studies show that small, non-lethal stressors trigger the same biochemical reactions as true threats. Your body prepares to fight or flee over an awkward text or a wrong look. You sweat, your pulse spikes, your focus narrows. The alarm is real. The threat is not. You're reacting not to reality but to echoes of an ancient past. Now, imagine how this plays out daily. You spiral from minor uncertainty into full-blown panic. You avoid phone calls like they're predators. You catastrophize harmless outcomes. But it's not your fault. It's biology. Evolution made your brain paranoid on purpose. The next time your system panics, pause. Ask, is this a threat or just an echo from a world with tigers in the grass? Because your fear isn't always wrong, but it's often outdated. And knowing that is the first step to silencing the alarm. What if your logic was just chasing its own tail? Imagine being certain that something is true, but your only proof is that you already believe it. That's the circular reasoning loop. A mental trap where belief becomes its own evidence, and doubt gets locked out. It feels like clarity, but it's a fog. A self-reinforcing illusion disguised as logic. You see it in arguments. I'm right because I know I'm right. Or, this book is true because it says it's true. The reasoning goes in circles, never touching the ground. There's no outside verification, just a loop, spinning tighter and faster. And because it confirms what you want to believe, it feels safe. Psychologists call it belief perseverance. Once an idea embeds itself in your mind, your brain starts protecting it. You search for confirming data. You avoid contradictions. You use your conclusion as your premise, and your premise as your conclusion. Round and round it goes, creating a fortress of certainty built on air. This loop isn't just flawed, it's contagious. Political ideologies, conspiracy theories, even personal relationships. You can fall in love with your belief, defend it, and never once test if it holds up to reality. And the more challenged you feel, the more tightly you cling to the loop. Truth becomes irrelevant. Only the comfort of consistency matters. So, next time you find yourself saying, "Of course it's true," pause. Ask, what would convince me I'm wrong? If the answer is nothing, you're not reasoning. You're recycling. And logic deserves better than a merry-go-round made of mirrors and echoes, endlessly spinning in place with no exit in sight or destination ahead. Just repetition, endlessly looping. Imagine walking past a stranger on the street. Their face is neutral, expressionless. But your brain, for a split second, thinks they smiled at you. You feel acknowledged, maybe even uplifted. But they didn't smile. You saw what wasn't there. This is the smile detection glitch, the tendency to misread neutral faces as happy, especially in unfamiliar people. Your brain is wired for social survival. It craves connection and seeks safety in others' expressions. So, when it's unsure, it errs on the side of friendliness. It adds a smile, even if none exists. It's not deception, it's a hopeful hallucination, a reflex that turns ambiguity into comfort. In one study, participants were shown rapid images of faces ranging from angry to happy. When the expressions were vague or in between, people overwhelmingly perceived them as happy. Even when they weren't, the brain filled in the blank with optimism. But this glitch has consequences. It can cause us to misjudge danger, overlook discomfort, or assume friendliness where there's none. It's why people often miss signs of social anxiety, depression, or even manipulation, because the face looks fine, and our brain wants it to be. This phenomenon shapes daily life, from customer service to politics to dating. We trust what looks warm. We assume emotion, even when there's only stillness. It's a glitch born from evolution. In a tribal world, assuming friendliness kept us safe. But in a complex world, it can blur boundaries. Sometimes the smile we see isn't kindness, it's a mask. And sometimes the mask hides suffering, not joy. We think we're reading faces, but often we're projecting what we want to find. So next time a stranger's face gives you comfort, pause. Is it connection, or just your brain painting a smile that wasn't really there? What if the goals you chase were built on illusions, because the failures were never allowed to speak? Imagine hearing story after story of someone who dropped out of college and became a billionaire, or a YouTuber who quit their job and found instant fame. These stories fill your feed, fuel your dreams, but they're not the whole picture. This is survival selection bias, your mind's distortion from only seeing what survived, while all the failures quietly disappeared. In war, engineers studied returning planes to find weaknesses, until one realized the fatal flaw. They were studying survivors, not the ones that didn't make it home. The same mistake happens with success. The startup that failed after 6 months, gone without a trace. The artist who chased their dream and crashed, no documentary, no podcast, just silence. Your brain collects the visible wins and assumes they represent reality. But behind every viral creator are 1,000 who posted in obscurity. For every best-selling author, countless others buried manuscripts in drawers. The algorithms won't show you the shadows, only the spotlight. And so, without realizing, you base your goals on ghosts. You chase blueprints that only worked once, in conditions that can't be repeated. You think success is the norm because failure leaves no trace. This bias feeds cruel expectations. When your plan doesn't work, you feel defective. But the system was rigged, not against your effort, but against your understanding of odds. Survival selection bias isn't just misleading, it's dangerous. It hides the cost. It glorifies the exception and buries the rule. So, the next time a success story sparks your ambition, pause. Ask, how many like this failed quietly? Because real wisdom lives not just in the stories that survived, but in the countless ones that didn't. What if comfort led you in the wrong direction? Imagine choosing a worn-out chair over a better one, or staying in a draining job just because it feels normal. You know there's a better option, but it's unfamiliar, and your brain flinches. This is the familiar equals sign safe fallacy, a deep-rooted bias where we confuse repetition with reliability and stay loyal to what hurts us simply because we've survived it before. Your brain evolved to favor the known. In uncertain environments, the familiar signaled survival. Even if it wasn't ideal, at least it hadn't killed you. But in the modern world, this instinct becomes a trap. We stick with bad habits, toxic relationships, or outdated ideas because they feel safe, not because they are. Studies show that people often prefer predictable discomfort over uncertain improvement. In experiments, participants chose familiar noise, pain, or frustration over new but possibly better alternatives. The unknown activates fear circuits, even when logic says, try. This fallacy affects everything. Voting patterns, eating habits, creative choices. The brain doesn't ask what's best, it asks what's been, and what's been becomes what stays. Even branding plays into this. A familiar logo or jingle feels safer than a better but unknown product. We trust what we recognize, even if it's let us down. To escape this loop, you must be willing to disappoint your instincts. The better path is rarely the familiar one. What if the pressure you feel wasn't real, but manufactured by your brain's panic circuitry? Imagine standing in line, refreshing your inbox, hearing a ping, seeing a clock tick down. Your breath shortens. You feel late, even if nothing's actually wrong. This is false urgency syndrome. your brain mistaking modern noise for ancient danger, and peace as a problem to solve, because calm now feels like something must be wrong. You evolved in environments where silence meant safety, stillness meant survival. Danger came suddenly, a predator's leap, a tribal scream. But now, urgency is everywhere. Notifications, countdowns, deadlines. Your brain responds the same way it always has, with stress hormones and narrowed focus. But there's no threat, just noise. Just endless stimulation dressed as emergency. Studies show that people under false time pressure perform worse, think less clearly, and make riskier decisions. You rush to reply. You skim instead of read. You panic scroll through chaos, convinced you'll miss something. But urgency is often an illusion, triggered by sounds, timers, flashing lights, a manipulation of your nervous system, not a signal of true danger. And here's the twist. Calm starts to feel suspicious. You check your phone compulsively. You feel lazy if you're not multitasking. You distrust stillness, even when it's healthy. Your body searches for pressure like a habit it can't quit. You're addicted to the alarm. Now imagine breaking the cycle. What if the next time you feel that rush, you ask, is this real, or is my brain confusing stimulation for survival? Because not every ping is a predator, and not every quiet moment needs to be filled. Sometimes, stillness is the safest place to be. What if feeling in control mattered more than being safe? Imagine gripping the steering wheel on autopilot. You're not really driving, but your hands are on it, and somehow that calms you. That's the control equal sign, safety illusion. Your brain craves control so deeply, it confuses certainty with survival. Even when the danger isn't real, studies show people feel safer driving themselves than flying, despite planes being far safer statistically. Why? Control. The illusion of control soothes fear more than actual security. In one experiment, people who pressed a fake button before a shock felt less pain. The button did nothing. But control, even imagined, changed perception. The fear isn't chaos, it's helplessness. Your brain evolved to predict and plan, to make meaning from randomness. When you lose that narrative, panic sets in. That's why people cling to routines after trauma, or overplan vacations, or fear letting others take the lead. Floating, not falling, triggers dread. Even rituals like checking the stove 10 times or writing endless to-do lists are attempts to build walls against uncertainty. The comfort isn't in the task, it's in the illusion of mastery over an uncontrollable world we cannot always bend. The illusion works until reality disagrees. A controlled life can still unravel. Accidents happen, plans fail, and when they do, those who clung hardest to control often suffer most, because they built their safety on illusion, not resilience. So, next time you feel fear rising as things slip beyond your grasp, pause. Ask, is this truly unsafe or just uncertain? Control is comforting, but it's not the same as being okay. Sometimes real safety begins where control ends. Imagine remembering a historic event. You swear you saw it unfold. The speeches, the drama, the emotions. But later you realize it wasn't real. It was from a film, a documentary, or a novel. Your brain took fiction and archived it as fact. This is fiction memory contamination. When stories, especially emotional ones, embed themselves so deeply, they overwrite actual memory. Your mind isn't a vault, it's a reconstruction site. Every time you recall something, your brain rewrites it. If a fictional detail slips in, an actor's voice, a cinematic moment, a scene from a book, it can fuse with truth. And once fused, it feels just as real. In one study, participants watched dramatized footage of real events. Later, many recalled fictional scenes as genuine. They couldn't tell the difference. The emotional weight made it stick, not the source. The more compelling the story, the more likely the brain is to adopt it. This isn't about gullibility. It's about how memory works. Emotions anchor memory. Narratives give it shape. So, when fiction delivers both, your brain rewards it with permanence. This bias shapes beliefs about history, politics, even personal identity. You might think you remember a childhood moment, but it was from a book you read, or a plot that mirrored your life, and now it's entangled in your past. It's more common than you think. You quote a speech that was never said. You describe a war scene that only happened on screen. Our brains crave narrative coherence, not source accuracy. If it fits the emotional tone of our reality, it gets absorbed. The blur grows slowly. What once inspired becomes what we believe we lived. We aren't lying, we're just remembering wrong with confidence. So next time you're sure you remember something, ask, was it life or just a story that made itself at home in your memory? What if your brain feared losing more than it loved winning? Imagine gaining $100. Feels good, right? Now imagine losing 100. That sting? It's stronger, sharper, and it lasts longer. This is the loss aversion trap. Your brain is wired to weigh loss twice as heavily as gain. In the mental economy of risk, pain is premium. We evolved this way for survival. In a dangerous world, avoiding loss was more important than chasing reward. Lose your food, your shelter, your tribe, and you die. So nature designed you to be loss sensitive, and that ancient instinct still rules your modern decisions. You hold on to stocks that are plummeting, hoping they'll recover. You keep items you don't use because you might need them someday. You stay in dead relationships, unwilling to lose what you've already invested. You make choices not to win, but to avoid the pain of losing. Loss aversion distorts your thinking. A 5% chance of failure feels riskier than a 95% chance of success feels exciting. That imbalance controls careers, investments, even love. You might pass on an opportunity, not because it's wrong, but because it carries the shadow of loss. Gamblers chase losses harder than wins. Investors sell rising stocks too early. Entire industries thrive on your need to avoid regret. Marketers use it to manipulate your urgency. Only two left. Sale ends tonight. Don't miss out. Your fear of losing what you never had drives behavior more than actual desire. You're not irrational, you're human. But growth demands discomfort. So, the next time you hesitate, ask, am I deciding to win or freezing to avoid a bruise? Because fear is loud, but freedom, the kind that changes lives, often waits just past the loss you're afraid to feel. What if pretending wasn't harmless? Imagine taking on a role, at work, online, or in a relationship. At first, it's just an act. You smile more, speak differently, fake confidence, or suppress emotion. But slowly, the mask stops feeling like a mask. You don't drop the role when you're alone. You forget where it started. This is role-play identity leak, a psychological shift where repeated performance seeps into personality. Your brain is plastic. It rewires with behavior. What you do often becomes who you are. Studies show that actors can temporarily adopt the traits of characters they play, even after stepping off stage. Police officers become more authoritarian, therapists more empathic. Repeated role-playing blurs the line between choice and identity. Online, it's even more subtle. The curated version of yourself, funny, confident, polished, gets more likes. So you perform it again. Then again, until the algorithm becomes your mirror, and the real you starts to dissolve beneath the performance. This isn't just mimicry, it's neural adaptation. Your brain reinforces patterns through repetition. The role becomes reflex. And over time, pretending confidence can create it, but pretending happiness can also bury pain. The leak works both ways. Even uniforms influence this shift. Clothing, setting, and social cues all signal who to become. And soon, you're no longer sure who started the act. What if the life you're jealous of doesn't exist? Imagine scrolling through social media. Smiles, sunsets, success. Everyone looks radiant, accomplished, perfectly happy. But in that same moment, you're tired, anxious, maybe even lonely. Your brain compares, and you lose. This is the social comparison spiral, where you match your lowest feelings against other people's highlight reels, and illusion becomes truth. Psychologists call it upward comparison. You look at those doing better and measure yourself against them. But what you're seeing isn't reality, it's curation. People post their wins, not their wounds. Filters blur the truth. Captions hide the struggle. But your brain doesn't adjust for that. It takes the image as fact, and pain as failure. Studies show social media increases anxiety, depression, and self-doubt, especially in those who scroll passively. The more you look, the worse you feel. And the more you feel behind, the harder you chase a fantasy stitched together from everyone else's best angles. You forget that even the happiest faces may be breaking behind the screen. And here's the trap. You start curating too. You post the smiles, not the tears. You craft an illusion to match theirs. But inside, the spiral deepens. Comparison becomes identity. Reality warps under the pressure to keep up with lives no one is actually living. You're not just watching a lie, you're building one. Now imagine stepping off that spiral. What if, next time you scroll, you ask, what's missing outside the frame? What isn't being shown? Because the truth isn't always captured, and worth isn't built from someone else's fiction. Sometimes, the most honest moments never get posted. What if the screen didn't just change what you saw, but what you felt? Imagine arguing online, hurling insults, or dismissing someone's story with a meme. You wouldn't say it face to face, but the screen erases presence. That's disembodiment bias, a psychological illusion where digital life makes you forget that people are real. In person, we see eyes, hear tone, notice hesitation. Online, we get pixels, flat avatars, words stripped of voice. The human disappears. And so does empathy. Studies show people act more aggressively online because the brain doesn't register the target as fully human. It's not sociopathy, it's separation. This bias feeds trolling, cancel culture, and emotional numbness. When someone suffers behind a screen, we scroll past. We debate tragedies like games. The further removed we are from bodies, voices, and faces, the easier it is to ignore the pain we cause or fail to recognize. Distance numbs responsibility, and context dissolves into static silence. The irony? We're more connected than ever, yet more detached. Texting replaces talking. Commenting replaces comforting. We feel safe behind the glass, but something vital gets lost. Compassion. The ability to sense someone's presence, their breathing, their pauses, their discomfort, evaporates in a wireless world. Disembodiment doesn't mean you're cruel, it means your brain is operating with incomplete input. So, next time you type, pause. Picture the person, hear their voice. Remember they have a body, a life, a mind as vivid as yours. The screen is not a shield, it's a mirror. What you say still echoes and leaves a trace behind in the silence of their world, long after you log out. Imagine waking up dreading the day ahead. You go through the motions. Same job, same arguments, same emotional weight. It's exhausting, maybe even painful, and yet, you stay. You don't quit, don't leave, don't change. This is habitual discomfort, acceptance, the brain's tendency to prefer familiar suffering over uncertain freedom. We don't just fear pain, we fear unpredictability. Neuroscience shows that uncertainty activates threat circuits in the brain even more than known pain. A toxic routine, a broken relationship, a dead-end path, they may hurt, but they're mapped, predictable. And predictability feels safe, even when it's slowly destroying you. Your brain learns to normalize discomfort if it repeats often enough. It rewires itself to see pain as background noise. You stop noticing how bad it feels. Instead, change starts to feel like the real danger. You tell yourself it's not that bad, that it's normal, that others have it worse. In one study, participants were more anxious waiting for an unpredictable mild shock than a guaranteed painful one. The unknown was more unbearable than the known. That's how deep the wiring runs. This bias traps people in jobs they hate, homes that stifle them, cycles that never heal. Because escape feels like chaos, and the brain prefers a familiar prison over an open, uncertain road. Discomfort becomes a habit. You stop flinching, you stop questioning. You start building a life around tolerable pain instead of possible joy. Change isn't blocked by chains, it's blocked by doubt. And doubt, when rehearsed daily, becomes identity. You begin to think endurance is strength, when sometimes it's just fear in disguise. So, next time you tell yourself to endure it one more day, ask, are you surviving or just scared of the door that isn't locked? What if the loudest voice wasn't the wisest, but your brain believed it anyway? Imagine someone speaking with volume, certainty, and force. They sound confident. They must know what they're talking about, right? Maybe not. This is the volume equal sign, truth fallacy, your brain's tendency to mistake noise for knowledge, loudness for logic, volume for value. In a crowded room, the loudest speaker grabs attention, not because they're right, but because they dominate the air. In our evolutionary past, volume signaled strength, leadership, danger. So your brain learned to listen to it. Even now, when someone shouts, interrupts, or floods a conversation, their confidence feels contagious. Their tone becomes persuasive, regardless of the facts. That's why misinformation spreads faster than truth. It's louder, bolder, easier to digest, delivered with conviction, even when wrong. Meanwhile, real experts pause, qualify, and tread carefully. They admit complexity, uncertainty, and to the brain, that restraint sounds like doubt, like weakness. So we gravitate toward the roar, not the reason. You see this in politics, in boardrooms, in classrooms. The person who yells drowns out the one who thinks. Social media multiplies the illusion, amplifying volume, ignoring nuance. The most dramatic comment gets the most likes. The loudest voice gets the mic. And slowly, we equate volume with value. We silence ourselves. Not because we're wrong, but because we're quiet. That's the danger. So the next time a loud voice commands the room, pause. Ask, is it true or just loud? Because confidence isn't a credential. Volume isn't wisdom. And sometimes the softest voice is the only one brave enough to speak the truth. What if your most vivid memories were partly false? Imagine recalling a childhood birthday. You see the cake, the candles, your friends' faces. It feels real, etched in detail. But one of those details never happened. The cake wasn't chocolate. Your best friend wasn't there. You added those pieces later without realizing it. This is the memory substitution glitch. When your brain fills in missing details with fiction so convincingly, you believe the whole scene is true. Memory isn't a recording, it's a reconstruction. Every time you remember something, your brain reassembles it, like editing a movie from scratch. And if parts are missing, your mind improvises. It pulls from similar memories, stories you've heard, even photos you've seen. Over time, the invented parts blend so smoothly into the real ones that you lose the difference. Researchers have implanted false memories in studies. Participants were told they'd been lost in a mall as a child. Many later recalled the event in vivid, emotional detail, even though it never happened. The brain's need for coherence is so strong, it sacrifices truth for narrative. This is why two people can recall the same moment and swear by opposite versions. Each brain edits its own story, and once a false memory is repeated, it reinforces itself. It no longer feels like imagination. It feels like truth. So ask yourself, do you remember the event or just the story of it? Luck attribution error. Imagine flipping a coin 5 times and getting heads each time. By the 6th toss, your brain whispers, tails is due, but the coin doesn't care. That feeling that a pattern is forming is a lie. This is the luck attribution error. It's the illusion that randomness has memory, that luck has a rhythm, that the universe keeps score. In reality, each coin flip is still 50/50ths. Each event is independent, but your brain sees shapes and noise. You win 3 games in a row, and suddenly you're on fire. You lose 3, and it feels cursed. You search for meaning in what's just chaos. Casinos thrive on this glitch. The roulette wheel shows a streak of red, and gamblers flood black, believing balance must return. But randomness doesn't balance. It drifts. It clusters. In 1913, the Monte Carlo casino saw black hit 26 times in a row. People lost fortunes believing red was due. That wasn't bad luck. It was bad logic. The brain builds false patterns to feel control. But control is an illusion too. We crave certainty, and luck feels like a cheat code. But it's just noise. Psychologists call this the gambler's fallacy, but it runs deeper. You see someone succeed and assume they're lucky, as if luck is a reward. But often, it's timing, access, hidden variables, or just pure chance. We say someone's born lucky, as if fortune is inherited, tracked, deserved. But chance doesn't follow rules. It doesn't care how badly you need a break. Recognizing this hurts, but it frees you. Luck isn't a code to crack, it's weather. You can't summon it, but you can shape what happens after it strikes. What if your search for truth quietly bent reality? Imagine running an experiment, believing deep down what the outcome should be. You don't lie, you don't fake data, but your mind, eager to confirm what it expects, begins filtering the noise, ignoring friction. That's the experimenter's bias. Even scientists, trained in objectivity, aren't immune. Their expectations subtly alter what they see, what they notice, what they prioritize. In a famous 1963 study, 2 groups of psychology students were asked to train rats. One group was told their rats were bred for intelligence, the other for stupidity. In truth, the rats were identical. Yet, the smart rats learned faster. Why? Because the students treated them differently, handled them more gently, expected improvement, and unconsciously gave better cues. Belief didn't just influence perception, it shaped the outcome. reality warped under expectation. This bias shapes how hypotheses are tested, how data is collected, even how results are written. The scientist becomes part of the experiment, and the line between observation and influence blurs. It's not fraud, it's subconscious distortion. The brain wants a story that fits. It sees patterns faster when they confirm our theories, and quietly dismisses what doesn't. Double-blind studies and peer review exist to catch this drift. But even then, subtle pressures remain. Publish or perish. Funding, reputation, pride. The truth becomes a negotiation. Escaping this bias means holding your own beliefs in doubt. It means chasing discomfort, not certainty. Because real discovery doesn't just challenge the world, it must first challenge the one observing it, and the mind behind the microscope. What if your sense of danger was never yours to begin with? Imagine turning on the news, scrolling through social media, or watching a gripping true crime show, and suddenly, your heart races. You lock your doors tighter. You hesitate to walk alone. But statistically, crime rates in many parts of the world have been declining for decades. So why does it feel like everything is getting worse? This is the media exposure distortion, a psychological phenomenon where repeated exposure to violent or alarming content reshapes your perception of risk. The brain is built to respond to threats, but it can't always tell the difference between direct danger and a secondhand story designed to provoke fear. The more you see it, the more you believe it's everywhere. And when every headline screams horror, your nervous system listens. Not rationally, but instinctively. You start believing that strangers are more dangerous, that going out is riskier, that the world is falling apart. When in truth, it might just be your screen broadcasting fear 24/7. You fear places you've never been. You avoid people you've never met. You imagine worst-case scenarios from headlines crafted to keep your attention. This isn't just paranoia, it's a cognitive trap. Real-world example? In 1994, Americans believed violent crime was rising, yet it had been falling. Why? Endless media coverage, and studies show that people who consume more televised news are more likely to overestimate the likelihood of being a victim of violence. Their anxiety doesn't reflect their neighborhood, it reflects the broadcast. Your fear may not be rooted in reality, but in repetition. The scariest thing might not be what's outside, but how media quietly rewires your instincts from the inside out. What if your brain wasn't designed to see truth, but to invent it? Imagine walking alone at night and hearing a rustle in the bushes. Your mind doesn't calculate probabilities. It creates a story. A predator, a stalker, a ghost. This is the meaning-seeking reflex, the ancient instinct to assign purpose to randomness. Evolution favored those who erred on the side of caution. Seeing a pattern where none existed could save your life. Missing one could end it. But today, that same instinct misfires. You notice repeated numbers on clocks, 11:11, and wonder if the universe is sending a message. A friend dreams of water, then gets bad news, and suddenly the dream feels prophetic. Tragedy strikes, and we say things like, everything happens for a reason, not because we know, but because we need to believe. In a world of chaos, coincidence feels unbearable. Our minds crave narrative, order, connection, even when reality offers none. A study at the University of British Columbia found that people under stress are significantly more likely to perceive patterns in meaningless noise. That means uncertainty doesn't just make us anxious, it makes us superstitious. Another experiment flashed random dots on a screen. Participants were told some had images hidden inside, though none did. Still, many reported seeing faces or shapes. Why? Because the brain isn't a camera, it's a storyteller. It filters reality through fear, hope, and instinct. It would rather invent a monster than admit the dark is empty. So we connect stars into constellations, events into fate, noise into prophecy, because meaning protects us from the abyss. But what if some things just, happen? Could you live in a world where the rustle means nothing at all? What if your desire wasn't truly yours? Imagine walking into a store and spotting a single item left on a nearly empty shelf. You weren't searching for it. You didn't even need it. But suddenly, it becomes irresistible. This isn't logic. It's the scarcity panic loop, a survival reflex hijacked by modern life. In our evolutionary past, rare meant essential. A scarce source of water could mean life or death. A limited food supply demanded swift action. Our ancestors evolved to crave what was hard to get, because hesitation could cost everything. Now fast forward to today's world, where marketers weaponize scarcity. Only 3 seats left. Last day to buy. Limited edition. These triggers light up our brain's fear centers, pushing us to act, not think. Even digital scarcity works. NFTs, exclusive content drops, one-of-a-kind items that don't exist in the physical world, yet still command obsession. Our emotional response doesn't distinguish between life-saving rareness and artificial limits designed to provoke panic. During the early days of the pandemic, toilet paper flew off shelves, not because people needed more, but because seeing empty shelves triggered an ancient alarm. Suddenly, everyone wanted what was disappearing. This is the loop. Scarcity breeds panic, panic creates demand, and demand fuels more scarcity. It doesn't matter if the item has real value, its vanishing act makes it feel vital. Even children show this instinct. In studies, toddlers preferred toys they were told were unavailable. The mind doesn't want what's good. It wants what's almost gone. This craving isn't about need. It's about losing something you didn't even care for, until you saw it slipping away. We believe we're making rational choices, but often we're just ancient instincts dressed in modern clothes, and the rare thing we crave, it might be nothing more than bait. Imagine being offered 2 doors. One leads to the unknown, the other to pain you already know. Most people choose the pain, not because they like it, but because it's familiar. This is the familiar pain bias. The brain, wired for survival, confuses predictability with safety. You'd rather stay in a toxic job than face unemployment, stay in a cold relationship than risk loneliness. Why? Because your brain clings to patterns, even if they hurt. Repeated wounds start to feel like home. Suffering becomes a script. This isn't weakness, it's biology. The amygdala, your brain's fear center, treats uncertainty as danger. It prefers suffering you can predict over joy that's unproven. You stay in old habits, revisit past failures, replay the same arguments, because they are familiar. The pain is real, but the path is known. It's not happiness your brain wants, it's control. And pain, no matter how destructive, offers a twisted form of stability that feels safer than the unknown. Trauma carves grooves into your neural pathways, and what's familiar gets reinforced like a looped song. You may not notice you're avoiding healing, because pain becomes part of your identity. A breakup, a betrayal, a failure, your brain replays them like rituals. You dress the wound, but never let it close. New risks mean letting go of who you were, and that feels like death to the ego. But you can challenge it. You can recognize when your brain mistakes history for destiny. The unknown isn't always danger. Sometimes, it's freedom in disguise. Familiar pain is a cage with an open door. It's terrifying to leave, but far scarier to stay. Take one brave step and trust that something better is finally possible. Imagine being offered 2 doors. One leads to the unknown, the other to pain you already know. Most people choose the pain, not because they like it, but because it's familiar. This is the familiar pain bias. The brain, wired for survival, confuses predictability with safety. You'd rather stay in a toxic job than face unemployment, stay in a cold relationship than risk loneliness. Why? Because your brain clings to patterns, even if they hurt. Repeated wounds start to feel like home. Suffering becomes a script. This isn't weakness, it's biology. The amygdala, your brain's fear center, treats uncertainty as danger. It prefers suffering you can predict over joy that's unproven. You stay in old habits, revisit past failures, replay the same arguments, because they're familiar. The pain is real, but the path is known. It's not happiness your brain wants, it's control. And pain, no matter how destructive, offers a twisted form of stability that feels safer than the unknown. Trauma carves grooves into your neural pathways, and what's familiar gets reinforced like a looped song. You may not notice you're avoiding healing, because pain becomes part of your identity. A breakup, a betrayal, a failure, your brain replays them like rituals. You dress the wound, but never let it close. New risks mean letting go of who you were, and that feels like death to the ego. But you can challenge it. You can recognize when your brain mistakes history for destiny. The unknown isn't always danger. Sometimes, it's freedom in disguise. Familiar pain is a cage with an open door. It's terrifying to leave, but far scarier to stay. Take one brave step and trust that something better is finally possible. Imagine walking into a room and seeing someone glance your way, then whisper to a friend. Your heart skips. Are they talking about you, laughing at you, judging you? Probably not. But your brain doesn't like silence. It hates blank spaces. So it fills the void with fear. This is void-filling projection, a psychological defense where the mind imagines judgment, rejection, or threat in moments of uncertainty. When others don't say anything, you assume the worst, and that assumption starts to shape your reality. You send a message, no reply. Your mind builds stories. They're mad. They're done with you. You messed up. But maybe they're just busy. You walk past someone who doesn't smile. Suddenly they must hate you. But maybe they're lost in thought. A friend cancels plans. Your brain whispers they've lost interest. But maybe they were just exhausted. The silence wasn't personal, but your mind made it personal. This isn't delusion, it's survival. Your brain evolved to detect threats early, so it fills gaps with warnings, not peace. Blankness feels dangerous, so your mind invents enemies, critics, betrayals. Not because it wants to hurt you, but because it's trying to protect you from the unknown. It confuses the absence of words with danger. But the damage is real. These imagined threats become emotional scars. You withdraw from people who never meant harm. You fear silence more than truth. But silence isn't proof. It's space. And space can mean rest, not rejection. Learn to pause. Breathe. Not every silence is a threat. Sometimes it's just quiet, and that quiet can be healing. What if fear of regret is what paralyzes your future? Imagine standing at a fork in the road. One path leads to action, the other inaction. You hesitate, not because you don't know what to do, but because you fear choosing wrong. So you wait, you stall, you do nothing, and then you regret it. That's anticipated regret paralysis. Your mind tries to protect you from future pain, but in doing so, creates it. The brain is wired to avoid regret like it's physical pain. Studies using fMRI scans show that when we imagine future regret, the brain's emotional centers light up. It's not theoretical. It feels real. So we freeze. We avoid decisions, delay choices, reject opportunities. We tell ourselves we're being cautious. But really, we're trapped in a feedback loop, fearing regret, doing nothing, and then regretting that very nothingness. In one experiment, participants played a game where they could take a small reward or gamble for a bigger one. When told they'd later see what they could have won, people became far more cautious. They weren't reacting to odds, they were reacting to the imagined sting of regret. And in life, this same mechanism plays out in jobs not taken, calls not made, love not confessed. It's not just about loss, it's about losing the possibility of something better. You don't avoid regret by avoiding action, you just defer it. Because the brain isn't predicting the future, it's reacting to fear. Breaking the loop means accepting that regret is part of any path. It means choosing the kind of regret you can live with, not the one where you wonder forever what could have been. Sometimes, the only way to beat the trap is to walk through it anyway, with courage louder than hesitation, and motion louder than doubt. What if a costume could hijack your brain? Imagine a stranger in a white lab coat walks into the room. You don't know them. You don't know their name, their background, or their intentions. But because of the coat, you listen, you believe, you comply. That single piece of fabric taps into something deep in your psychology, a shortcut your brain uses to decide who to trust without evidence or logic, just instinct. This is the authority costume trap, a cognitive bias where symbols of authority override critical thinking. Lab coats, badges, military uniforms, even expensive suits, they don't just signal power. They manufacture it. In 1961, Stanley Milgram's infamous obedience experiment revealed just how far this illusion can reach. Volunteers, instructed by a calm man in a lab coat, delivered what they believed were fatal shocks to other people. They hesitated, but they still obeyed. Why? Because the coat said so. That's the trap. You don't just obey authority, you obey the appearance of authority. A con artist in a uniform can unlock doors that truth alone never could. A confident voice in a lab coat can sell fake medicine and influence behavior. A sharp-dressed scammer can convince you to hand over your savings. The clothes don't just influence how you see them, they influence how they see themselves. Studies show that people wearing a doctor's coat perform better on cognitive tests, not because they're smarter, but because the outfit alters their mindset. It's called enclothed cognition. What we wear can literally rewire performance. It affects attention, confidence, and even memory. So, the next time someone in uniform gives you an answer, pause. Strip away the costume in your mind. Are you trusting the person or the symbol stitched into their clothes? What if your memories weren't records of the past, but edits? Imagine looking back on a moment you once regretted, only to feel strangely justified now. You remember your choices, but not the fear. You recall the outcome, but not the uncertainty. This is the history distortion effect, the mind's quiet rewriting of memory to match who you've become. Your brain doesn't store facts, it stores narratives. And as your beliefs evolve, so do your memories. When you change your mind about someone, your memories of them follow. That friend who betrayed you? Suddenly you remember subtle signs you swear were always there. But were they? Or did your brain splice them in later? Psychologists at Northwestern University found that every time you recall a memory, you're not retrieving it, you're recreating it. And like a saved file overwritten, each replay leaves a trace of today's self on yesterday's truth. The more often you recall a memory, the more likely it is to shift, even subtly, toward comfort, coherence, or justification. In one study, participants misremembered their stance on political issues after changing their minds. When asked to explain their previous views, many unknowingly rewrote history, convinced they had always believed what they believe now. This isn't lying. It's your brain defending your identity, because inconsistency feels like a threat. Admitting you were wrong shatters the illusion of a unified self. So your brain smooths the cracks, erases the detours, and paints a story where you were always the hero, always wise, always right enough. But what if the truth is messier than memory allows? What if the past isn't fixed, but rewritten every time you look back? What if your emotions weren't born from thought, but from something far older, your senses? Imagine the smell of rain on dry soil, the texture of worn cotton against your skin, or the soft hum of a distant engine in the night. These aren't just background details, they're primal signals. Your body is constantly whispering to your brain, shaping how you feel before a single rational thought has time to speak. This is sensory emotional override, the ancient mechanism where sensation hijacks emotion and emotion controls thought. Science shows sensory input bypasses logic. The olfactory bulb, responsible for smell, has direct access to the amygdala and hippocampus, your emotion and memory centers. That's why a scent can collapse time, flooding you with feelings from decades ago. Texture does it too. A silk scarf might calm you, while rough burlap can irritate or agitate. And sound? A sudden high-pitched tone can trigger anxiety before your brain even knows what's happening. These reactions are older than reason. This override isn't just psychological, it's hardwired. Music can move you to tears, not because of the lyrics, but because of the vibrations resonating with ancient brain patterns. Crowded, noisy spaces can trigger panic because your senses interpret them as chaos. Therapists use this intentionally. Weighted blankets for anxiety, white noise to soothe PTSD, aromatherapy to retrieve or repair trauma-linked memories. In one study, participants made riskier decisions when exposed to subtle citrus scents or soft ambient music. They didn't notice the change, but their behavior shifted. Their emotional compass had been hijacked by the invisible. You think your mind drives your emotions, but often it's the hum of a fan, the warmth of a sweater, or the smell of something familiar that's steering your soul. Imagine watching a twist ending in a movie and saying, "I knew it all along." But did you really? Or did your brain rewrite the memory to make you feel like you saw it coming? That's the "I knew it" bias, also called hindsight bias. It's a glitch in memory where the outcome seems obvious only after it happens. You don't recall how confused or uncertain you really were. Your brain edits out the doubt and paints the past with false clarity to protect your self-image from feeling wrong or lost in the moment. It's not just about movies. You see it in news events, disasters, elections, relationships. After a breakup, you say, "I always had a feeling." After an accident, "I knew something was off." But that certainty didn't exist before. It's your brain compressing reality into a cleaner story. This isn't deception. It's a defense mechanism. We hate chaos, so the mind edits unpredictability into illusion. Uncertainty feels like a threat, and the brain rushes to replace it with a sense of order, even if it's false. Psychologists first studied this in the 1970s. People were shown stories, asked to predict outcomes, then told the real ending. Afterward, they claimed that they had expected it, even when their original predictions didn't match. Memory had changed. The truth was rewritten to match what now felt obvious. This isn't rare, it's automatic. Your brain prefers coherence over honesty and discomfort. This bias is dangerous. It makes us overconfident. It blocks learning. If you believe you saw it coming, you don't examine what you missed. But the truth is, life is unpredictable. Accepting uncertainty is wisdom. Pretending you predicted it? That's just ego wearing a mask of memory. What if color shaped your mood before you had a chance to think? Imagine walking into a room washed in deep blue. You breathe slower, your heart eases. Now imagine that same room glowing red. Tension spikes. Muscles tighten. You don't choose this. You don't even notice it. That's color-emotion imprint, where your nervous system reacts to color like it's a signal, not a shade. It's not taste, it's wiring, deeply rooted in your evolutionary survival system. Our brains evolved in a world where color meant life or death. Blood meant danger. Blue skies meant calm. Fire meant act now. These ancient cues never left. In modern life, we think we're rational. But studies show otherwise. In a University of Rochester experiment, athletes performed worse when wearing red. Heart rates rose, focus dropped. Another study found people rate strangers as more attractive, dominant, or dangerous, depending on the color of their clothes. Red makes faces seem more aggressive. Blue makes them more trustworthy, even when nothing else changes. Marketers exploit this every day. Fast food signs glow red and yellow, not by accident, but because those hues heighten arousal and hunger. Blue lights in train stations reduce crime. Pink jail cells lower aggression. Even hospitals use muted tones to calm pain responses. Your body listens to color before your brain does. You decorate, brand, and dress with meaning you don't fully understand. Not because you're weak, but because your biology whispers beneath your choices. Escaping this bias isn't about ignoring color. It's about learning the language it speaks. Because long before logic builds a sentence, color has already finished the first draft of your mood. What if your brain couldn't resist finding patterns, even when none exist? Imagine you hear a loud bang right after you think of someone you haven't seen in years. Or your phone crashes just after reading about solar flares. Two events, close together, no logical link. But your brain connects them, instantly, automatically, and with total confidence. This is the linked events illusion, a psychological glitch where proximity in time feels like causation. Your mind is wired to spot patterns. It's how we survived. But when that instinct runs unchecked, coincidence turns into conspiracy. You start believing the universe is sending you signs, that random glitches are warnings, that dreams predict outcomes. But most of the time, these are just accidents wearing masks of meaning. Take the vaccine myths. People hear about someone getting sick shortly after a shot, and suddenly they believe the vaccine caused it. But in truth, correlation isn't causation. Timing alone doesn't equal connection. Yet, emotionally it feels undeniable. It's the same with superstitions. Break a mirror, then trip over a chair. Coincidence? Maybe. But your brain links the two and builds a story around it. The more emotional the event, the harder it is to unstick that false cause. Even in science, this bias sneaks in. Researchers sometimes misinterpret results, assuming one variable caused the outcome simply because it came first. This is why rigorous studies use controls to break the illusion. But in daily life, we rarely apply that discipline. We react. We assume. We connect dots that don't belong to the same picture. Your brain hates randomness, so it fills in meaning, even when the truth is, there is none. So, next time two things happen close together, stop. Ask, are they truly linked, or did your mind just tell a beautiful lie? What if your emotions weren't entirely your own? Imagine watching a man walk down an empty street. Nothing is happening until the music begins. Add a soft piano, and suddenly it's sorrow. Replace it with drums and brass, and it's triumph. This is the soundtrack mood hijack. How music manipulates perception, altering the meaning of a moment by simply changing the sound behind it. In film, this is no accident. Directors use soundtracks to reshape how you feel about characters, scenes, even silence. A still face becomes grieving. A slow pan becomes a battle cry. But your real life isn't immune. Music in a store makes you move slower. Fast food chains use upbeat music to rush you out. Sad songs after heartbreak amplify pain. Uplifting tunes in the gym make effort feel like glory. In a 2014 study from the University of Groningen, participants viewed neutral faces while listening to happy or sad music. Their emotional judgment matched the soundtrack, not the expression. In another experiment, ambiguous scenes paired with different music triggered entirely opposite reactions. The same actor, same setting, seen as sinister or sympathetic based purely on background score. That's because your brain doesn't isolate sound. It blends it into your emotions, using it as context. Minor chords whisper loss. Rising tempo fakes urgency. A dissonant string can make a doorway terrifying. You think you're feeling naturally, but you're often reacting to artificial cues. Even memories are vulnerable. A song tied to a person, a place, can rewrite how you recall it. A neutral event becomes nostalgic. A small joy becomes cinematic. You are not just living life. You are scoring it. So, the next time your heart swells or dread creeps in without cause, pause. Is this feeling truly yours? Or has it been scored, edited, and emotionally hijacked by the music you didn't even notice was playing? What if the person you just passed wasn't a stranger at all, but a ghost from your forgotten past? Imagine locking eyes with someone on the street. Your heart skips. Something about their face feels deeply familiar, but you know logically you've never seen them before. This unsettling sensation is the familiar stranger confusion. It's not magic. It's not intuition. It's your brain copying and pasting fragments of forgotten faces, stitching together the illusion of familiarity from the scraps of your memory. Your mind is a master at compression. Every day, it stores thousands of faces, store clerks, passengers, pedestrians, most of which you'll never consciously recall. But that data doesn't vanish. Instead, it lingers in the background, quietly shaping your emotional response. When a new face shares enough similarities with a buried memory, your brain fills in the blanks. Suddenly, a stranger feels like someone you've known forever. Not because they are, but because your mind made them familiar. In psychological experiments, participants consistently rated computer-generated, blended faces, created from a mix of familiar features, as more trustworthy and likable. Why? Because the brain favors what it thinks it knows. Advertisers even exploit this, blending celebrity traits into unknown models to spark subconscious recognition. It works, because your brain runs on shortcuts, and familiarity feels like safety. This glitch isn't limited to faces. Places, voices, even gestures can trigger the illusion. A laugh that reminds you of a childhood friend, a walk that mimics your grandfather's, the sound of keys jingling in just the right rhythm. You're not imagining it. Your brain is building bridges from forgotten fragments, stitching meaning from echoes. Familiarity isn't proof of connection. It's proof of how well your brain remembers what you forgot. Imagine people assuming you're confident, sarcastic, shy, cold, or arrogant, and over time, you start acting like it. Not because it's true, but because it's expected. This is the reverse echo belief, a subtle distortion where you begin to internalize what others assume you believe, even when it's completely wrong. You didn't start out that way, but their expectations echo so loudly, your identity starts to reshape around them, like soft clay taking the shape of invisible hands. You say something once, awkwardly, and someone laughs. They decide you're always sarcastic. Now, every word you say gets filtered that way. Eventually, you play into it, until sarcasm becomes part of you. Or someone calls you cold, distant. You weren't, but the label sticks. So, you withdraw, just to stay safe. What starts as defense becomes personality. What began as reaction becomes performance. This is deeper than peer pressure. It's identity erosion by reflection. You begin performing beliefs you never chose, just to avoid friction. And soon, the mirror of expectation becomes more powerful than your own voice. Psychologists call this the looking glass self, the idea that you become what others reflect back at you. But reverse echo belief twists that further. It's not just how you see yourself, it's adopting beliefs you never held, just because others believe you do. And once it's in motion, it feels easier to agree with the echo than correct it. You settle into the role they've written for you. But silence has a cost. You lose your core. You become a ghost of assumptions. To reclaim yourself, you must name what's not truly yours. Find your own voice before the echo replaces it for good. What if your worst week wasn't cursed, but just math in disguise? Imagine your car breaks down, then your phone shatters, then you get sick. It feels personal, like the universe has turned on you. But it hasn't. That's the temporal clustering illusion. Your mind sees a pattern where probability is simply random. Bad events grouped close in time feel like fate, but they're just coincidence wearing a mask. The human brain is wired for pattern recognition. It's what helped us survive, find food, spot predators, avoid danger. But this superpower misfires when it meets chaos. In statistics, randomness isn't spread evenly. It clumps. Like flipping a coin and getting 5 heads in a row. That's not weird. That's chance. But your brain screams, something's wrong. Emotion floods reason. The heart builds stories the numbers never wrote. In one study, people shown random sequences said they looked too patterned. They expected randomness to feel more scattered. But true randomness clusters. That's why you hear bad things come in threes. They don't. You just notice when 3 hit you fast. The rest get forgotten, filed away as background noise. The illusion isn't just in the events, it's in the memory. This illusion can spiral. You believe you're unlucky. You brace for more pain. And that tension changes your behavior, making mistakes more likely. You walk like it's raining even under a clear sky. But here's the truth. Timing doesn't mean meaning. A cluster of misfortune doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're alive, inside a universe ruled not by fairness, but by probability. And randomness has no memory. It doesn't know what just happened. It doesn't care. Which means the next moment is still yours to define. What if your most familiar habits are the ones you remember the least? Imagine stepping outside, walking a few blocks, then suddenly freezing. Did you lock the door? Did you turn off the stove? You were there. You did it. Probably. But the memory is blank. Not hazy, not distant. Gone. This is the routine memory hole, a psychological blind spot where repetitive actions vanish from memory, not because you forgot, but because your brain never saved the details in the first place. When something becomes automatic, your mind stops paying attention. It stops recording the moment as experience, driving home on autopilot, brushing your teeth, locking a door. These actions fall into procedural memory, efficient but fragile. You're not consciously tracking each step. So, if something interrupts the pattern, even slightly, it creates doubt. And because there's no vivid memory, your brain panics. Did you do it? Or did you just think about doing it? This is why you stare at your stove after leaving the house, unable to remember. Your brain was busy planning your next task, your conversation, your day, not the click of a knob or the sound of a lock. You acted, but you didn't observe. It's the cost of living efficiently. Neuroscience shows that the hippocampus, the part of your brain tied to memory, activates less when actions are routine. It saves energy by skipping the obvious, but the cost is uncertainty. That eerie blank space in your timeline becomes a pit of anxiety, and the more stressed, tired, or distracted you are, the deeper the memory hole gets. Routines blur, details vanish. You repeat actions but don't remember them. So next time you can't recall if you did something small, don't panic. You're not broken. You're just human. And your brain, in all its genius, sometimes forgets what it considers too simple to save. What if your brain wasn't built for truth, but for survival? Imagine checking the clock and it's 3:33. Then someone texts you at exactly that moment. It feels like a signal, a message from the universe. But it's not. It's your brain misfiring, desperate to assign meaning to coincidence. This is the coincidence misfire, a glitch in perception that turns randomness into revelation. Your mind evolved to detect patterns because spotting a rustle in the grass could mean avoiding a predator. Better to find a false pattern than to miss a real one. But today, that same instinct hijacks reality. You think about someone, and they call. You hear a song from childhood and suddenly your day feels significant, but none of it is connected, except in your mind. A 2008 study by Stanford researchers showed that people under cognitive stress were far more likely to see patterns in random sequences. Dots became faces. Noise became signal. Your brain, overwhelmed, starts weaving unrelated events into stories. And those stories stick because they offer comfort. That's why gamblers swear by lucky socks, why strangers believe in soulmates after a shared birthday, or why near-death experiences feel like fate, even when they're just physics. The brain would rather believe in a cosmic design than accept chaos. But the more you seek patterns, the more you find them, even where none exist. This isn't just bias, it's neurological. The brain's pattern recognition center lights up with dopamine when it spots a match, even a false one. Meaning feels good. Coincidence feels like destiny, but they're not the same. So the next time reality lines up in eerie perfection, ask yourself, is it a sign? Or is it just your brain, brilliantly, beautifully, trying to make sense of a world that never promised to make sense? What if you've never truly seen the world? Not even once. Imagine waking up one day to realize that every color, sound, shape, and feeling you've ever known wasn't reality. It was your brain's edited version. This is the reality filter, the invisible lens through which you experience everything. You don't see the universe as it is. You see what your brain lets you. Your retina captures photons, but it's your mind that decides what's a tree, a face, or a threat. Raw data is meaningless until filtered through you. Your brain deletes more than it reveals. Over 11 million bits of information hit your senses every second, but you're only aware of about 50. The rest is discarded, compressed, rearranged, turned into the illusion of a smooth, stable world. Even time is filtered. Your sense of now is delayed by milliseconds, a necessary lag so your brain can sync the chaos into order. You live in the past, believing it's the present. Perception isn't passive, it's generative. Neuroscientists now suggest that what you see isn't received, it's predicted. Your brain guesses what's out there, then updates the guess based on feedback. You hallucinate reality, and when others agree with your hallucination, you call it truth. That's why eyewitness testimony is unreliable. That's why optical illusions work. That's why you are a construction, a stable identity pieced together from filtered memory, emotion, and expectation. You don't just use a filter, you are the filter. The self you feel, the I in your head, is a hallucination that the brain maintains because it's useful. It keeps you functional. But it's not real. And yet, you believe in it, because it's the only version of reality your filter will allow.